He used his last breath to save an injured she-wolf from a cliff, not knowing she was the alpha queen. The chocolate cake was perfect. It had taken me 7 hours to make it, from grinding the imported cocoa beans to decorating it with golden shavings. My husband stomped on it in front of the entire court, and I finally understood that I would never be enough. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, 3 years before that chocolate splattered across marble floors like my dignity. I was 19 when I married the Alpha King of Monaco. My name is Rose Silverfang, and I was the peace offering between 2 kingdoms that had spent a century trying to destroy each other. My father's advisors assured me that marriage to King Aldrich would be a fairy tale. They showed me portraits of the palace overlooking the Mediterranean, spoke of gardens filled with roses that matched my name, promised me a life of luxury and love. They lied. Or perhaps they simply did not know that luxury without love is just a gilded cage, and roses have thorns that draw blood. The palace was everything they promised physically. Marble floors so polished you could see your reflection, though I learned to hate looking at mine. Tapestries worth more than entire villages hung on walls that echoed with emptiness. The scent of beeswax candles mixed with salt air from the sea, and underneath it all, the metallic tang of my own loneliness. King Aldrich was handsome in the way that predators are beautiful before they strike. Tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of smile that made courtiers laugh and queens weep. Our wedding night, he took me with the efficiency of a man completing a political contract. No tenderness, no words. When he finished, he turned his back and fell asleep, and I stared at the ceiling of our royal bedchamber and felt my wolf whimper deep inside me, rejected by the one who was supposed to be our mate. He was not my fated mate. I knew this. Diplomatic marriages rarely involved fate, only strategy. But I had hoped that perhaps love could grow where destiny had not planted it. I was young and foolish, and still believed that effort could create what the moon goddess had not ordained. For 3 years I tried. I learned his native language, spending hours with tutors until I could speak without accent. The first time I greeted him in flawless Monaco French, he barely glanced up from his war maps. "About time," he said. "A queen who cannot speak properly is an embarrassment." I redecorated his private chambers in shades of deep green and gold, the colors of his mother's house that he claimed to love. He walked in, looked around, and asked why I had wasted money on frivolous changes. The room had been perfectly fine before. I organized hunting parties, remembering that he had mentioned loving the chase. I rode beside him, laughing at his jokes, ensuring the kitchens prepared his favorite foods for the picnics afterward. He spent the entire hunt flirting with Lady Margot, a visiting noblewoman with curves that I, thin and sharp-edged with anxiety, could never possess. I studied military strategy, reading every book in the royal library about warfare and tactics, thinking perhaps if I could discuss his campaigns intelligently, he might see me as a partner. During a council meeting, I offered a suggestion about troop placement that would have saved lives. He laughed. Actually laughed. "My dear queen," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "Leave the thinking to those capable of it. Your job is to look pretty and produce an heir. You are failing at both." The council members had looked away, embarrassed for me but not enough to defend me. That was when I learned that being a queen meant nothing if the king did not respect you, and his lack of respect gave permission for everyone else's disregard. The attempts at intimacy were worse than his public cruelty. He came to my bed perhaps once a month, always drunk, always rough. There was no pretense of desire or affection. I was a vessel for potential heirs, nothing more. And when month after month I did not conceive, his visits became accusations. "What is wrong with you?" he would demand. "Are you barren? Did your father send me a broken queen?" I wanted to scream that perhaps the problem was his inability to create anything but misery, but queens do not scream. Queens smile and curtsy and bleed internally, where no one can see the wounds. The palace became my prison, beautiful and suffocating. I walked marble halls and felt my footsteps echo like a heartbeat that no one heard. The servants pitied me. I could see it in their eyes, but pity changes nothing. The court ladies whispered when I passed, speculation about whether I would be set aside for a more fertile queen. The nobles treated me with the bare minimum of respect that protocol demanded, knowing that my husband's disregard made me powerless. I developed routines to survive. Morning walks in the gardens where I could pretend the roses understood my loneliness. Afternoons in the library where books could not reject me. Evenings in the music room where I played piano and let the notes express what I could never say aloud. My wolf, once vibrant and strong, went quiet inside me. I rarely shifted anymore. What was the point of being a shifter if you felt trapped in both forms? 3 years of this slow death, 3 years of hoping that maybe tomorrow he would see me. 3 years of performing the role of perfect queen while dying inside. Then I discovered the chocolate. It was a visiting ambassador from Spain who mentioned it casually during a state dinner. "I hear your majesty has a notorious sweet tooth for chocolate," he said to the king. "My own king in Madrid says it is his only weakness." Aldrich had smiled, genuinely for once. "My mother used to make chocolate cakes when I was a boy. I have not tasted anything like them since she died." Something stirred in my chest, a spark of hope in the ashes. Here was something I could do, something he actually wanted. If I could recreate his mother's cake, perhaps he would finally see me as something other than a disappointment. I spent weeks researching. I interviewed his childhood servants, now elderly and living in the town below the palace. I obtained recipes from his mother's personal cookbook, preserved in the royal archives. I practiced in secret in the kitchens at dawn when the staff was minimal, burning batch after batch until I got the texture right, the sweetness balanced, the richness perfect. His birthday was approaching. I decided this would be my moment, my grand gesture, the thing that would finally break through his indifference. The morning of the attempt, I woke before dawn with my heart hammering against my ribs. Today would be different. Today he would taste his childhood, his mother's love baked into every layer, and he would understand that I was trying, that I cared, that I could be what he needed. I went to the kitchens at sunrise. The head cook, Marguerite, looked at me with those sad, understanding eyes that made me want to weep. "Your Majesty need not trouble herself with such tasks," she said gently. "I want to," I replied, tying an apron over my morning dress. "Please, let me do this." She nodded and instructed the other servants to leave us. For the next 7 hours, I worked. My hands cramped from grinding the cocoa beans using the traditional stone method his mother had preferred. The heat from the ovens made sweat drip down my spine, soaking my dress. The scent of chocolate filled the kitchen, rich and dark and promising. I measured everything precisely, mixed the batter until my shoulders ached, watched through the oven window as the layers rose perfectly. While they cooled, I made the frosting, tasting and adjusting until it matched the description from his servants. "Not too sweet," they had said. "Dark chocolate, with a hint of orange and cinnamon." The decoration took 2 hours alone. I steadied my trembling hands and piped intricate designs across the top, added the golden shavings, each one placed deliberately, stepped back and looked at my creation. It was perfect, more than perfect. It was 7 hours of hope crystallized into cake form. I imagined presenting it to him, imagined his face softening when he tasted it. Perhaps he would smile at me, really smile, not the cruel twist of lips he usually offered. Perhaps he would take my hand and say thank you. Perhaps he would see me. At 8 in the evening, I carried the cake myself to the great dining hall. Protocol said I should have a servant present it, but I wanted him to know I had made it, that I had put my heart into this gesture. The doors were open. Inside, Aldrich sat at the head of the long table surrounded by his favorites. Lord Bastian, who laughed too loudly at unfunny jokes. Duke Ferdinand, who provided my husband with mistresses. Count Alexandra, who gambled away fortunes and still received invitations. They were all there, wine flowing freely, the air thick with cigar smoke and masculine arrogance. I entered carrying the cake on a silver platter. The conversation died immediately. All eyes turned to me. Aldrich looked up from his wine glass, his eyes already glassy from drink. "What is this?" he asked, his voice sharp. My mouth went dry, but I forced words out. "I made you a birthday cake, my lord. Your favorite, like your mother used to make." The silence stretched. Someone coughed uncomfortably. Aldrich stared at me like I was something disgusting he had found on his shoe. "You made this?" His voice was dangerously soft. "Yes, I spent all day. The Queen of Monaco baking like a common servant." He stood suddenly, his chair scraping against stone. "Is this what you think your role is? Playing at being a cook?" His voice rose to a bellow. "You are already a disappointment as a wife, as a queen, as a woman. Now you want to add humiliation to my list of grievances?" I could not move, could not speak. The cake felt impossibly heavy in my hands. He crossed the distance between us in 3 strides, looked down at the chocolate creation. For one heartbeat, I thought I saw something in his eyes. Recognition. Memory. a flicker of the boy who had loved his mother's cakes. Then he grabbed the cake with both hands and smashed it against the marble floor. The sound it made, that wet, catastrophic splatter, will haunt me forever. Chocolate exploded across white marble like blood. The golden shavings scattered like shrapnel. 7 hours of work destroyed in 3 seconds. "Clean it up," he said coldly. "Or have a real servant do it, since you seem to prefer their work." He walked out. His courtiers followed like obedient dogs. Not one looked back. I stood there, the empty platter still in my hands, staring at the wreckage of my last hope. Then my legs gave out and I fell to my knees in the middle of the destroyed cake. Chocolate soaked into my dress. My hands shook so violently I could barely pick up the pieces. This was it, the moment I finally understood. No amount of effort would ever be enough. No gesture would ever break through. I was married to a man who would rather destroy something beautiful than acknowledge my existence. Tears fell silently, mixing with chocolate. I did not sob. Queens do not sob. We break quietly, where only we can witness our own destruction. "This chocolate is incredible." I gasped and looked up. Rowan Ashford, the King's Royal Guard Chief, knelt beside me in the ruins of my cake. I had not heard him approach, had not known anyone remained in the hall. He held a piece of cake, actually eating it. His amber eyes met mine with an expression I had not seen in 3 years. "Kindness, you are a master confectioner," he continued, his voice low and warm. "This is the best chocolate I have ever tasted." I could not speak, could only stare at this man who was tasting my failure like it was a delicacy. He was beautiful in a way completely different from the king. Where Aldrich was polished cruelty, Rowan was rugged strength, dark hair tied back, revealing a scar that ran from temple to jaw, broad shoulders that came from actual combat, not just standing around looking regal, hands that were picking up chocolate with a gentleness that made my chest ache. "If I were the king," Rowan said, his voice dropping to something dangerous and intoxicating, "I would spread this chocolate across your body and feast until I was completely satisfied." The air changed. Electricity crackled between us like lightning before a storm. My wolf, silent for 3 years, suddenly surged inside me. Recognition slammed into my chest with enough force to stop my breath. The scent of him, pine forest after rain, smoke and metal, and something uniquely him, invaded my senses, and my wolf howled internally with one word: "Mate." No, this was not possible. But I looked into Rowan's amber eyes and saw them widen with the same recognition. His pupils dilated. His breath caught. The piece of chocolate fell forgotten from his fingers. "My queen," he whispered, and it was not formal. It was possession and need, and 3 years of suppressed desire wrapped in 2 words. I tried to stand, but my legs would not work. He helped me up, his hand closing around mine, and the touch sent electricity racing up my arm and straight to my core. The mate bond snapped into place so violently I nearly cried out. "This cannot be real," I managed to say. "I have known for 6 months," Rowan replied, not releasing my hand. "Since the day you passed me in the gardens, and your scent brought me to my knees. I have watched you for 6 months, Rose. Watched him destroy you piece by piece. Watched you try so hard to earn love from a man who has none to give. Watched you fade like a flower in darkness. Why did you never say anything?" My voice cracked. "Because you are the queen. Because I am just a soldier. Because what good would it do except torture us both? But tonight," his voice broke, "tonight I cannot stay silent while you kneel in the ruins of your kindness. You deserve so much better than this." I pulled my hand away, terrified of what I was feeling. "I am married. To the wrong man. He is my king. He is your prison. This is impossible." I backed away from him, from the mate bond that was singing through my veins like fire and promise. "This changes nothing." "It changes everything," Rowan said softly. "You finally know you are not broken. You are not unlovable. You are simply bound to a man who does not deserve the treasure he was given." I ran then, fled from the dining hall, from the chocolate on the floor, from the amber-eyed man who had just shattered my carefully constructed resignation. I made it to my chambers and slammed the door, pressing my back against it as my whole body trembled. My wolf was going insane inside me, demanding I go back, claim our mate, run away with him, anything except stay trapped in this loveless marriage. But I was queen. Queens did not run away with royal guards no matter what the moon goddess dictated. Queens endured. Queens sacrificed. Queens died slowly in golden cages. I went to my window and looked out at the night. The moon was nearly full, huge and silver in the black sky. And as I stood there, feeling the mate bond pulse through me with every heartbeat, my wolf did something it had not done in 3 years. It howled. The sound erupted from my throat, raw and desperate and defiant, a howl of recognition, of claim, of finally being seen by the one who was meant to see me. And somewhere in the distant corridors of the palace, another wolf answered. Finding your fated mate while married to another man is like discovering you have been breathing wrong your entire life. Every breath hurts now, because you know what you are missing. 2 weeks had passed since that night in the dining hall, since the chocolate cake and the amber eyes and the recognition that shattered my world. 2 weeks of trying to pretend that nothing had changed when everything had changed. 2 weeks of dying slowly in a different way than before. I avoided Rowan Ashford with the desperation of a drowning woman avoiding the only hand reaching to save her. But he was everywhere, escorting the king through corridors I needed to cross, standing guard outside council chambers I had to enter, training with his men in the courtyard below my tower window, where I took breakfast each morning. Every time I saw him, the mate bond pulled like a fishhook lodged in my chest, dragging me toward him against my will. The physical agony was worse than anything I had experienced. My wolf, silent for 3 years, was now constantly clawing at my insides, demanding I go to our mate. She did not care about marriage vows or political alliances, or the fact that claiming what was ours would destroy everything. She only knew that our other half was close, and we were not with him. Sleep became impossible. I would lie in my bed staring at the ceiling, feeling Rowan somewhere in the palace like a compass needle pointing north. My body ached with need, not just sexual, though that burned through me constantly, but the deeper need to be near him, to hear his voice, to breathe the same air. The mate bond was a living thing demanding to be fed, and I was starving it. Food lost all appeal. My ladies-in-waiting expressed concern as I pushed away meal after meal. How could I explain that nothing tasted right anymore, that my senses were tuned to pine and rain and smoke, and everything else was ash in my mouth? I grew pale, shadows appearing under my eyes like bruises. My dresses hung looser. My hair lost its shine. I was disappearing, fading like a ghost haunting her own life. The king noticed during a state dinner with visiting nobles from Genoa. My dear wife appears to be wasting away, Aldrich announced loudly, his words slightly slurred from wine. Perhaps the stress of being queen is too much for her delicate constitution. He looked me up and down with open disgust. Or perhaps you are finally becoming as ugly on the outside as you are useless on the inside. Should I start searching for a second wife? A younger one with more vitality? The Genoese ambassador laughed uncomfortably. The nobles around the table found their plates suddenly fascinating. I sat frozen, fork halfway to my mouth, feeling the familiar burn of humiliation spread through my chest. I assure you, my lord, I am perfectly well, I said quietly. You look like a corpse, he replied. At least have the decency to maintain appearances. You embarrass me. I excused myself early, fleeing to my chambers where I could finally breathe. But breathing hurt. Everything hurt. The mate bond pulsed with fury at the way our mate's king spoke to us. My wolf wanted blood. I wanted to disappear. The humiliations continued, growing worse as if Aldrich could sense my increased vulnerability. During a council meeting about trade negotiations, I offered a suggestion about tariff structures that would benefit our merchants. The financial minister had been nodding, clearly considering it, when Aldrich cut in. Gentlemen, please forgive my wife's attempt to participate in matters beyond her comprehension. The queen believes that because she can read, she can also think. His smile was sharp as a blade. Perhaps we should assign her to organize flowers for the next banquet instead. That seems more suited to her limited abilities. I felt Rowan's presence before I saw him. He was standing guard by the door, and I could feel his rage like heat from a fire. Our eyes met for half a heartbeat. In that glance, I saw murder. Pure, undiluted willingness to kill for me. It terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. The king began flirting openly with Lady Marianne, a visiting noblewoman from the French court. He seated her beside him at dinners, danced with her at balls, walked with her in the gardens while I watched from my window. The message was clear. You are replaceable. You are nothing. You are here on borrowed time. I endured. Queens endure. But my wolf was no longer silent, and every night I felt myself slipping closer to a cliff edge I could not see. The breaking point came during the royal hunt. It was a tradition, apparently, this monthly hunt, where the king and his favorites rode into the forest to kill things, and drink themselves into stupors. I normally avoided these events, but Aldrich insisted I attend this one. "Try to look like a proper queen for once," he ordered. "The Spanish delegation is visiting and they expect to see a united royal couple." I wore my riding clothes and mounted my mare, a gentle gray named Luna, who was one of my few sources of comfort. The hunting party assembled, the king, his cronies, the Spanish nobles, and the royal guard led by Rowan. I had not been this close to him in 2 weeks. The scent of him hit me like a physical blow. Pine and rain and smoke and man. My wolf surged inside me, demanding I shift and run to him. I gripped Luna's reins until my knuckles turned white, fighting for control. Rowan's amber eyes found mine. The mate bond sang between us, visible only to us, connecting us like a golden thread in the sunlight. I saw his jaw clench, saw his hands tighten on his horse's reins. He was fighting it too. The king was already drinking, passing a wineskin back and forth with Duke Ferdinand. As we rode deeper into the forest, his mood grew crueler with each sip. "Tell me, my dear wife," he called loudly enough for everyone to hear, "do you even know how to ride properly? Or are you as frigid on horseback as you are in bed?" Laughter erupted from his followers. The Spanish nobles looked uncomfortable but said nothing. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to react. "Perhaps if you were more of a woman," Aldrich continued, spurring his horse closer to mine, "I would actually desire you, but you are like a statue, cold, lifeless. It is like bedding marble." My wolf snarled inside me. I felt her pushing against my control, wanting to shift and tear out his throat. I breathed through my nose, counting heartbeats, maintaining composure by sheer force of will. The huntmaster spotted a large stag ahead. The party gave chase, horses thundering through the forest, branches whipping past. I hung back, not trusting myself near the king when my wolf was this close to the surface. The stag darted left. Aldrich drew his bow, aimed, released. The arrow flew wide, disappearing into the trees. The stag escaped. "You distracted me," Aldrich roared, wheeling his horse toward me. "You and your pathetic presence made me miss." "My lord, I was 20 feet behind you." He did not let me finish. His riding crop came down across my shoulder, hard enough to make me gasp. Luna startled, dancing sideways. Another blow caught me across my raised arm as I tried to shield my face. "This is your fault," he screamed, drunk and furious. "Everything is always your fault." The third blow never landed. Rowan was suddenly there, his horse between mine and the king's, his hand catching the crop mid-swing. The entire hunting party went silent. "Your Majesty," Rowan said, his voice carefully neutral but his body radiating violence. "Perhaps we should return to the palace. The stag is long gone." For a terrible moment, I thought Aldrich would strike Rowan instead. The king's face was purple with rage, veins bulging in his forehead. Then he seemed to remember where he was, who was watching. He jerked the crop from Rowan's grip. "Fine," he spat. "This hunt is ruined anyway." He glared at me. "Try not to ruin dinner as well, wife." He spurred his horse back toward the palace, his followers scrambling after him. The Spanish delegation departed with hasty bows. Within moments, only Rowan and I remained, along with 2 other guards who had the sense to keep their distance. Rowan dismounted and came to Luna's side. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough, barely controlled. "I am fine." I was not fine. My shoulder burned where the crop had struck, but physical pain was nothing compared to the storm of emotion raging inside me. Rowan reached up, his hand hovering near my arm where the blow had landed. "May I?" I nodded. He gently pushed back my sleeve, revealing the red welt already darkening to purple. His fingers brushed my skin and the mate bond exploded at the contact. I gasped. He closed his eyes, his jaw clenched so hard I heard his teeth grind. "I am going to kill him," Rowan said softly. It was not a threat. It was a statement of absolute fact. Our eyes met. In that moment, surrounded by forest and witnesses at a distance and the smell of my own blood on the air, a decision formed between us without words. Silent, final, inevitable. "Not here," I whispered. "Not now." "No," he agreed. "But soon." That night, I could not sleep. The welt on my shoulder throbbed. My wolf paced inside me like a caged animal. Around midnight, I gave up trying to rest and went to my private garden, a small walled space connected to my chambers by a hidden door. It was my refuge, filled with night-blooming jasmine and roses that perfumed the air with sweetness. Rowan was already there, waiting in the shadows by the fountain. I should not be here, he said, but he did not move to leave. Then why are you? I asked, my heart hammering. Because if I watch you suffer one more day without doing anything, I will kill that man with my own hands in front of his entire court, and damn the consequences. We stared at each other across 10 feet of moonlit garden. The mate bond pulled tight as a bowstring. My wolf threw herself against my control, demanding I go to him. I went. We collided in the center of the garden, his hands in my hair, my fingers clutching his shirt, our mouths meeting with 3 years of hunger and 2 weeks of denial. The kiss was not gentle. It was desperation and fury and need given physical form. He tasted like wine and danger, like everything forbidden and therefore irresistible. His hands were strong but gentle, holding me like I was precious and breakable in his. The mate bond exploded at the contact, fire racing through my veins, every nerve ending alive for the first time in my existence. This was what kissing was supposed to feel like, this consuming, world-ending need. With Aldrich, intimacy had always been cold obligation, mechanical and joyless. With Rowan, it was destiny. It was coming home to a place I had never been but somehow always known. We broke apart, both breathing hard, foreheads pressed together. Rose, he whispered, and the way he said my name was a prayer, and a claim, and a promise. We cannot do this, I said, even as I clutched him closer. I know. He pulled back enough to look at me, his amber eyes burning in the moonlight. But I am done pretending I do not feel this. Done watching him destroy you. Done standing by while you die slowly. What choice do we have? The words came out broken. We always have choices. He led me to the bench beneath the jasmine arbor, pulling me down beside him. Tell me everything. All of it. Do not hide from me anymore. So I did. In the darkness of the garden with jasmine perfuming the air and the moon hiding behind clouds, I told him everything I had never told anyone. About the wedding night when Aldrich turned his back on me. About the years of trying to earn love that would never come. About the creeping numbness as I realized I was trapped. About the moments, dark and shameful, when I stood at windows and thought about stepping out into nothing. I thought about running away, I confessed. Taking Luna and riding until I reached somewhere he could not find me. But I am a queen. My marriage is a treaty. If I leave, 2 kingdoms go to war and thousands die. So I stayed, and staying was killing me. Rowan listened without interrupting, his hand holding mine, his thumb tracing circles on my wrist. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. I come from nothing, he finally said. My father was a blacksmith. My mother took in laundry. When I showed aptitude with a sword, they scraped together enough to buy me an apprenticeship with the Royal Guard. I worked for 20 years to become chief, 20 years of proving myself, of being better than men born to privilege, of earning respect one fight at a time. Why are you telling me this? Because I know what it is to be trapped by duty, to sacrifice everything for position. I became chief of the Royal Guard 3 years ago. Do you remember your coronation? I nodded. It had been a blur of ceremony and ritual. I was assigned to stand behind the king during the ceremony. I had the perfect view of you. And when you took your vows, promising to honor and serve, I saw your light, this radiance. You believed in the fairy tale. You were so young and so full of hope, his voice roughened. Then I watched him snuff that light out, week by week, month by month, year by year. I watched you fade, and I could do nothing because I was just a guard, and you were the queen and the mate bond had not revealed itself yet. When did you know? I whispered. 6 months ago. You walked through the gardens and the wind carried your scent to me. Wild roses and rain and something uniquely you. My wolf recognized you instantly. I fell to my knees right there in the training yard. My men thought I was ill. He laughed bitterly. Ill. I was dying from wanting something I could never have. Why did you never say anything? What good would it do? Make us both more miserable? Give us something to want that would destroy us to claim? He turned to face me fully. But tonight, when he hit you, when I saw blood on your skin because of him, something in me broke. I cannot watch anymore, Rose. I cannot stand by while my mate suffers. What are you suggesting? I asked, though I already knew. What if there was a third option? He said carefully. Not staying, not running, but freedom. Freedom how? What if the king was no longer here? The words hung in the air between us, dangerous and seductive. I should have been horrified, should have pulled away, reported him for treason, clung to my morality. but all I felt was a terrible, overwhelming relief. Are you suggesting— I could not even finish the sentence. I am suggesting that accidents happen, Rowan said softly, especially to arrogant men who drink too much and take unnecessary risks. Men who ride drunk on cliffsides. Men who make enemies at every turn. The tragic death of a king is sad, but not unheard of. That is murder, I whispered. That is justice. His hand cupped my face. He has been killing you for 3 years, slowly and publicly. No one calls that murder. Why should this be different? I should have said no, should have been stronger, better, more noble. But I looked into Rowan's eyes and felt the mate bond singing between us, and thought about a life without humiliation, without pain, without dying inch by inch in a golden cage. I need time to think, I finally said. Of course. He kissed my forehead gently. I am not asking you to decide tonight. I am just saying that options exist, paths we have not considered. But we both knew. In that moment, in that garden, with jasmine and moonlight, and the taste of him still on my lips, the seed had been planted. The idea had taken root, and ideas, once born, are nearly impossible to kill. We began meeting every night after that. At first, we told ourselves we were just talking, just being together as mates deserve to be, but every conversation circled back to the same subject. The cliffs north of the palace, I mentioned one night. Aldrich loves riding there when he is drunk. He thinks it makes him look brave. The path is narrow, Rowan observed. Easy to slip in darkness. He goes alone sometimes. Dismisses his guards to prove his fearlessness. Foolish. Yes. We were not planning anything. We were just observing, just speaking hypothetically, just exploring possibilities. But hypotheticals became specifics. Observations became plans. Possibilities became probabilities. The new moon is in 3 weeks, Rowan said during our 5th night together. Total darkness. No witnesses. He always drinks heavily during new moons. Says it helps him sleep. Drunk men are clumsy. Falls happen. Yes, I agreed. They do. I knew what we were doing. Knew with absolute clarity that we were plotting murder. But I felt more alive planning my husband's death than I had felt in 3 years of trying to love him. The guilt I knew I should feel was distant, abstract. The relief was immediate and intoxicating. On the 10th night, Rowan kissed me with an urgency that stole my breath. Are we really doing this? He asked against my lips. I think we are, I whispered back. There is no going back from this choice. I know. We will have blood on our hands. Better blood than this slow death. He pulled me close, his face buried in my hair. You deserve to be free, Rose. You deserve everything. I did not say that freedom had a price. Did not mention the voice in the back of my mind asking what kind of woman could plan her husband's murder and feel not horror, but excitement. Did not acknowledge that we were crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. Instead, I kissed him again and let the mate bond drown out every doubt, every fear, every shred of the person I used to be, who believed in honor and duty, and doing the right thing, even when it destroyed you. I was planning to kill my husband, and for the first time in years, I felt alive. Rowan kissed me one last time before dawn broke, before we had to return to our separate roles as queen and guard, as strangers who did not know that destiny had bound them together in blood and moonlight. You deserve to be free, he whispered against my lips. I wanted to tell him that freedom had a price, that we were trading one kind of blood for another, that I could already feel the weight of what we were planning settling into my bones like a sickness. But I said nothing, just kissed him back and let the first light of dawn find us still tangled together in the garden, plotting murder and calling it love. We did not know yet how much that freedom would cost, did not know about the innocent man who would pay for our choices, did not understand that some prices are paid not by those who make the choice, but by those who have no choice at all. But we would learn. Soon enough, we would learn. They say that before you commit murder, you should practice. I practiced my own death first. 10 days remained until the new moon. 10 days until darkness would cloak the cliffs, and an accident would free me from my golden cage. But Rowan and I both knew that hope was not enough. We needed certainty. We needed to understand every detail of how a body falls, where it lands, what makes death look accidental rather than orchestrated, which is why I found myself studying the northern cliffs like a scholar preparing for final examinations, except my subject was murder, and the test would be pass or fail with no second chances. I began visiting the cliffs during daylight hours, establishing a pattern that would seem innocent later. I told my ladies-in-waiting that I had developed an interest in herbal medicine, that the rare plants growing near the cliff edges were valuable for healing. They looked at me with those pitying eyes that had become so familiar, probably thinking the barren queen was searching for fertility herbs. Let them think that. Their assumptions were my cover. The cliffs were a 30-minute ride from the palace, far enough to be private, but close enough that the king's drunken rides there were frequent. The path wound through dense forest, before opening onto a dramatic overlook where the land simply ended, dropping away into nothingness. I visited 5 times over the course of a week, each time noting different details. The cliff face was roughly 50 meters high, jagged rock formations jutting out at irregular intervals on the way down. At the bottom, massive boulders created a killing field where anything falling would be shattered beyond recognition. The path at the top was narrow, barely wide enough for a horse, with loose gravel that shifted underfoot. On the inland side, scrubby bushes and twisted pines offered handholds. On the ocean side, nothing but air and seabirds. I studied the moss patterns. They grew thick on the shaded areas, slick and treacherous when wet. I noted which sections of the path had the loosest gravel, where a stumbling drunk man might catch his foot. I memorized the layout like a map, understanding that when the night came, Rowan and I would need to engineer an accident so perfect that no one would question it. But understanding was not enough. I needed to feel it. Needed to know in my bones exactly how the fall would happen, how quickly, from what angle. Needed to ensure that when Aldrich went over that edge, it would be swift and final with no chance of survival to tell tales. 7 days before the planned date, I made my decision. I would test it myself. The reasoning was sound, I told myself. As a shifter, I could survive injuries that would kill a human. My wolf form healed faster, bones knitting in hours rather than weeks. If something went wrong during my practice run, I would recover, and I would gain invaluable knowledge about exactly how the fall would play out. I did not tell Rowan. He would have forbidden it, would have said it was too dangerous, would have insisted on finding another way. But I was the queen. I was the one who needed to be certain. This was my choice to make. I went alone in the late afternoon when the sun was beginning its descent, and the servants assumed I was in my chambers resting. I rode Luna to the forest edge, then shifted, letting my wolf form take over. 4 legs were steadier than 2 on uncertain terrain, and my wolf's instincts might save me if things went wrong. The transformation always felt like coming home. My bones restructured, fur replacing skin, senses sharpening, until I could smell individual pine needles and hear the heartbeat of a rabbit 300 yards away. My wolf shook herself, gray fur rippling, and padded silently toward the cliffs. Standing at the edge in wolf form, I could see the full scope of what I was planning. The drop seemed even more dramatic from this low angle. Wind whipped up from the ocean below, carrying salt spray and the cries of gulls. One wrong step and I would fall, just like Aldrich would fall. I began testing carefully. First, I walked along the edge, feeling for loose spots. Found several, marked them in my mind. Then I simulated stumbling, letting my paws slide on the gravel, catching myself before going over. Again, learning the physics of it, the balance point where recovery became impossible. The third simulation, I committed more fully. I let myself slide further, testing how quickly momentum built, whether there were handholds on the way down. My back paw hit a patch of moss I had not noticed, hidden in shadow. It was like stepping on ice. My leg shot out from under me. I scrambled, claws scrabbling at rock, but the gravel gave way beneath me and suddenly I was falling. The cliff face rushed past. I twisted in midair, wolf instincts trying to land safely, but there was nothing safe about this fall. I hit a rock outcropping 10 meters down, the impact driving the air from my lungs. Heard the snap of my back leg breaking. Then I was wedged on a narrow ledge barely wider than my body, unable to move without sliding off into the killing drop below. Pain exploded through me in waves. My leg was shattered, bone protruding through fur and skin. I tried to shift back to human form. Humans sometimes healed differently. Maybe the break would be less severe, but the agony was too intense. My body refused the transformation, trapped in wolf form by trauma and shock. I tried to stand. My broken leg collapsed under me. I nearly slid off the ledge entirely, catching myself at the last second with my front claws dug into rock. Panic set in. I was stuck, broken, alone. No one knew I was here. Rowan thought I was in my chambers. The servants would not check on me until dinner, hours away, and even then they would search the palace. not the cliffs. I howled. The sound echoed off the rock face, desperate and primal, calling for help that would not come. The cliffs were remote, the forest around them thick. Who would hear? I howled again, and again, until my throat was raw and my voice cracked. The sun continued its descent. Shadows lengthened. The temperature dropped as evening approached. My broken leg throbbed with every heartbeat. Waves of agony that made me dizzy and nauseous. Blood matted my fur, dripping onto the rock beneath me. I was going to die here, not murdered by a cruel husband, but killed by my own arrogance in thinking I could practice death without dying. The irony was almost funny. Almost. I will die before I get my revenge, I thought, consciousness starting to fade at the edges. All that planning, all that hope, and I will die on this ledge like a stupid animal. Then I heard it, the sound of footsteps, human footsteps, moving through the forest. I howled again, putting every ounce of remaining strength into the cry. The footsteps quickened, coming closer. Branches snapped. Then a man's voice, rough with concern. "Hello? Is someone hurt?" I howled again, weaker this time. A face appeared at the cliff edge above me. A man I did not recognize, maybe 30 years old, with brown hair and a beard, wearing the simple clothes of a woodsman. His eyes widened when he saw me. "Moon's mercy," he breathed. "How did you get down there, girl?" He disappeared for a moment, then returned with coils of rope from what must have been a pack. "Hold on," he called down. "I'm coming to get you." He secured the rope to a tree and rappelled down the cliff face with the confidence of someone who had done this before. When he reached my ledge, he moved slowly, talking in a gentle voice. "Easy now. I know you are hurt. I am going to help you, but you need to trust me. Can you do that?" I whined softly. What choice did I have? He examined my leg, his touch surprisingly gentle for such rough hands. "Badly broken," he murmured. "You must be in agony, poor thing. Let me get you secured." He shrugged off his cloak and wrapped it around me carefully, immobilizing my broken leg as best he could. Then he fashioned a sling from the rope and lifted me against his chest. I was not a small wolf. Gray wolves rarely are, but he carried my weight without complaint. "All right, girl. This is going to be uncomfortable, but we need to get you off this ledge." The climb back up was torture. Every movement jostled my broken leg, sending fresh waves of pain through me. I whimpered despite myself, and the man, I still did not know his name, spoke constantly, his voice a lifeline in the sea of agony. "Almost there. You are doing so well. Just a bit further. That is a brave girl." When we finally reached the top, he laid me down carefully on soft grass. I was panting, vision swimming, barely conscious. He checked my leg again, then lifted me back into his arms. "My cabin is not far. I have supplies there, things that might help. Can you hold on a bit longer?" I managed a weak whine of acknowledgement. He carried me through the forest as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Through my pain, I was aware of the irony. This stranger was saving me, the queen who was planning to murder her king. This man who knew nothing about me except that I was an injured wolf was risking himself to help me. And soon, very soon, his kindness would be rewarded with suspicion and blame. But I could not tell him that, could barely think through the pain. So I lay in his arms and let him save me, already mourning what my salvation would cost him. The cabin appeared through the trees, small and rustic but well-maintained. Smoke rose from the chimney. The man, my savior, kicked open the door and carried me inside, laying me on a rug before the fire. "Let me get supplies," he said, moving to shelves lined with various items. I drifted in and out of consciousness as he worked. He splinted my leg with wood and torn cloth, his movements practiced and sure, brought me water in a bowl, held my head while I drank, disappeared outside and returned with fresh meat. Rabbit, I thought, which he cooked and offered to me in small pieces. "You need to eat," he said when I turned my head away. "To heal. Come on, girl. Just a little." I ate because refusing would raise questions, because I needed strength to survive this, because his kindness was undoing me, and I needed to focus on something other than the growing weight of guilt in my chest. As I ate, he talked, not expecting answers, just filling the silence. "My name is Cassian," he said. "I live here alone, have for 3 years now. I am a woodsman, supply timber to the palace and the town. It is simple work, but honest. I like the solitude." He paused, staring into the fire. "I lost my wife and child 3 years ago. Childbirth took them both. After that, I could not bear to stay in town where everything reminded me of them. So I came here. The forest does not judge, does not pity, just exists. His voice held old pain, worn smooth by time, but never fully healed. I understood that pain intimately. You are special, are you not? He continued, looking at me with knowing eyes. Not just a common wolf. I have seen enough animals to know the difference. There is intelligence in your eyes. Understanding. You are a shifter, I think. I froze. How did he know? Do not worry, he said quickly. Your secret is safe with me. I have no love for those who persecute shifters. My wife was a healer, used to help your kind when they were injured and could not risk going to human doctors. I learned from her how to tell the difference, how to treat shifter injuries. His voice softened. She would have liked you. Over the next 2 days, Cassian cared for me with a devotion I had not experienced since before my marriage. He kept the fire burning, brought fresh water constantly, hunted rabbit and squirrel and cooked them to perfection. He talked to me like I was human, telling me about his life, his memories, his loneliness. Sometimes I think about leaving, he said on the second evening, finding a new town, starting fresh, maybe even falling in love again. But then I think, what if I lose them too? What if caring about someone just means signing up for more heartbreak? He shook his head. Sometimes it is easier to stay alone than risk losing again. I understood that too, had lived it for 3 years in a different way. The fear of hoping, of trying, of opening yourself to pain. But unlike me, Cassian had chosen his solitude. I had been imprisoned in mine. By the 3rd day, my shifter healing had done its work. The leg was still tender, still ached, but the bone had knitted enough that I could shift back to human form. I waited until Cassian left to check his hunting traps, then forced the transformation. It hurt. Moon above, it hurt. But I pushed through, letting my body restructure until I stood on 2 legs instead of 4, human skin replacing gray fur. I was naked, covered in dried blood and dirt, but human. I found clothing in a trunk, must have been his wife's, preserved all these years. A simple dress that hung loose on my frame but covered me. I was sitting by the fire when he returned, and the look on his face when he saw me would haunt me forever. He dropped the rabbits he was carrying, fell to his knees. Your Majesty, he whispered, head bowed. So he had known, or suspected, and saved me anyway. Please, I said quickly. Rise. You saved my life. I should be kneeling to you. He stood slowly, not meeting my eyes. Forgive me. I did not realize... I suspected you were shifter royalty, but the queen herself, Cassian. I waited until he looked at me. What you did for me, the care you showed, it matters more than you know. I was hunting alone, testing my wolf form after so long confined to the palace. I fell. You saved me, but I need you to keep this secret. If the king knew I was here, alone, injured, I let the implication hang. Understanding dawned in his eyes. Everyone knew the king's temper. Of course, Your Majesty. Your secret is safe with me. I swear it on my wife's memory. The oath struck me like a physical blow. He was swearing on his dead wife's memory to protect me. Me, who was planning to use him as a scapegoat. Me, who would destroy his life to save my own. Thank you, I managed. I should return to the palace before I am missed. Let me escort you part of the way. Your leg will heal. I am stronger than I look. I needed to leave before the guilt choked me. But thank you for everything. He nodded, still uncomfortable in my presence now that he knew who I was. If you ever need anything, Your Majesty, I am always here. I knew. That was the problem. I rode Luna back to the palace as the sun set, my mind racing. The practice fall had failed spectacularly, but it had given me exactly what I needed, perfect understanding of how the fall would kill. And it had given me something else, something I had not anticipated, a witness, a convenient, innocent witness who could be blamed when the king died on those same cliffs. Rowan was waiting in my chambers, pacing like a caged animal. When I entered, he spun around, relief and fury warring on his face. Where were you? I have been going mad. Your ladies said you were resting, but you were not in your chambers, and... He stopped, seeing my face. What happened? I told him everything. The fall, the broken leg, Cassian, the 3 days in his cabin. And as I spoke, I watched Rowan's expression change from concern to something calculating. A woodsman who knows you were at the cliffs, he said slowly, who saved you, who knows you were testing something. He does not know about our plan, I said quickly, but he knows you were there, alone, practicing something. Rowan's eyes gleamed. Rose, do you not see? This is perfect. He is our scapegoat. My stomach dropped. He saved my life, and he will survive this. He will be tried, certainly, probably imprisoned, maybe exiled, but he will not be executed. There will not be enough evidence for that. Rowan took my hands. Think about it. When the king dies on those cliffs, investigators will look for anyone who knew the area, who had been there recently. They will find evidence of Cassian's rescue. They will question him. He will admit to helping a wolf, you, and they will twist it into obsession. A woodsman obsessed with the queen, sabotaging the king's path to have you for himself. That is monstrous, I whispered. That is survival. Rowan's grip tightened. We need someone to blame, or they will look too closely at us. Cassian is perfect. He is already there, already connected, and he will live. That is more mercy than the king has shown you. I wanted to argue, wanted to say that we could not sacrifice an innocent man for our freedom, but the words died in my throat because I knew Rowan was right. We needed a scapegoat, or the investigation would eventually point to us, and Cassian, kind and honest and desperately alone, was perfectly positioned to take the fall. He saved me, I said again, weaker this time, and we will make sure he is not executed. That is the best we can do. I pulled my hands away, wrapping my arms around myself. I met his kindness, saw his humanity, and still I am planning his ruin. You are planning your survival, Rowan corrected. There is a difference. Was there? I was no longer sure. That night, I dreamed of two men. One pulled me from a cliff edge, wrapping me in his cloak and carrying me to safety. The other stood beside me at a different cliff, watching as a third man fell to his death, then turning to point at my savior and whispering, "Blame him." I woke in darkness, unsure which man was which, unable to tell if the nightmare was memory or prophecy, or the truth of what I was becoming. 7 days until the new moon. 7 days until I would become a murderer. And now, an innocent man would pay the price for my freedom. I told myself it was worth it. Told myself that Cassian would survive, that exile was not death, that small sacrifices were necessary for greater goods. But when I closed my eyes, I saw his face as he swore on his dead wife's memory to protect me, and I knew that no matter how I justified it, I would carry that oath like a stone around my neck for the rest of my life. Some prices are paid in blood, others in honor. I was learning that both could destroy you equally. The king died on a moonless night, drunk and arrogant until the very end. I held another man's hand and watched my husband fall, and when I screamed for help, every tear was real, but not for him. The day began with cruelty, as most days did. The new moon hung invisible in the sky, a dark promise that tonight everything would change. I woke with my heart hammering against my ribs, terror and anticipation warring inside me. Today, it would happen today. I dressed carefully, chose a blue gown that made me look pale and fragile, the perfect grieving widow, though the grief had not yet occurred. My hands shook as my lady's maid laced the bodice. She noticed, commented that I seemed unwell. I told her I had not slept well, truth disguised as excuse. The council meeting was scheduled for mid-morning. I almost asked to be excused, but absence would be noticed, remembered later. So I went, sat in my designated chair at the far end of the table from Aldrich, and watched him destroy me one more time. "Gentlemen," he announced, already 3 glasses of wine into the morning, "I have been thinking about the succession. My wife has failed for 3 years to provide an heir. Perhaps it is time to consider alternatives." The room went silent. Every man there knew what he meant. "Your Majesty," Lord Chancellor Bertrand said carefully, "the Church does not permit. The Church permits whatever I tell it to permit." Aldrich interrupted. "I am the king. If I wish to take a second wife to secure the succession, I will find a priest willing to bless it." He looked directly at me. "After all, what use is a barren queen?" I kept my face carefully blank, but inside, my wolf snarled. We had lain together perhaps a dozen times in 3 years, always when he was drunk, always quick and cold, and devoid of any warmth that might actually create life. And now he blamed me for the emptiness he had created. "I hear the Princess of Aragon is of age now," he continued. "Beautiful, I am told, and her father is desperate for alliance. A second, younger wife might be just what this kingdom needs." He wanted me to react, to beg, to cry, to give him the satisfaction of seeing me broken one more time. Instead, I smiled. "Whatever serves the kingdom best, my lord." The smile seemed to enrage him more than tears would have. His face reddened. "You care so little? You are content to be replaced? I am content to serve Monaco in whatever capacity you deem appropriate, I replied, my voice steady. If that service no longer includes being your wife, so be it. It was the first time I had ever stood up to him publicly, the first time I had refused to play the role of victim, and I could do it because I knew, in less than 12 hours, he would be dead. The meeting continued, but Aldrich could not let it go. He made increasingly crude jokes about my inadequacies, my failures as a woman and a queen. The counselors laughed, because refusing to laugh would anger him. I sat and endured and counted the minutes until I would never have to endure again. The banquet that evening was a celebration of some military victory I could not bring myself to care about. The great hall was filled with nobles and officers, wine flowing freely, the air thick with smoke and sweat and masculine pride. I sat beside Aldrich at the high table, barely touched my food, and watched him drink. He always drank heavily during new moons, some superstition about dark nights and wolf madness. Tonight, he was exceeding even his usual excess. Glass after glass of deep red wine disappeared down his throat, and whenever servants refilled his goblet, I made sure they poured generously. More wine, husband? I asked sweetly when his glass ran low. He looked at me with bloodshot eyes. Since when do you care about my comfort? I am attempting to be a good wife. Better late than never, perhaps? He laughed, a harsh bark of sound. Far too late. But pour away. At least you can do that much correctly. I signaled the servant, watched the wine fill his glass to the brim. He drank half in one swallow. Rowan stood against the far wall, positioned where he could see the entire hall. Our eyes met once across the crowded room. His face was impassive, the perfect soldier on duty. But I saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand never strayed far from his sword. He was ready. We both were. The banquet stretched on for hours. Aldrich grew louder, cruder, his words slurring together. At one point he grabbed a serving girl, pulled her onto his lap despite her obvious discomfort, made jokes about how at least some women in his palace were properly shaped. The girl's face burned with humiliation while courtiers laughed. I felt nothing. No jealousy, no anger, just a cold certainty that in a few more hours, this man would cease to exist. Midnight approached. I could feel it in my bones, the turning of the world toward darkness. Aldrich pushed away from the table, nearly knocking over his chair. I need air, he announced. Too hot in here. Too many people. This was the moment. The opportunity we had been waiting for. My heart hammered so hard I thought everyone must hear it. I could use some air as well, I said, standing. Perhaps I might accompany you, my lord? Every head in the hall turned toward me. Queens did not request to accompany their drunk husbands on midnight rides. It was unprecedented, suspicious. Aldrich stared at me, swaying slightly. You? Want to ride with me? The night is beautiful, and you said earlier I should try harder to be a proper wife. I made my voice meek, submissive. I thought perhaps we could talk, away from the court. He laughed, the sound ugly and mocking. Trying to be a good wife now? 3 years too late, my dear. But fine. Come along. Let us see if you can even stay on your horse. Rowan stepped forward immediately. Your Majesty, allow me to assign guards for your protection. Not necessary. Aldrich waved him off. I am riding in my own kingdom. What danger could there be? Protocol requires guards, Your Majesty, Rowan insisted. At least 2 men to ensure your safety and the Queen's honor. Aldrich rolled his eyes but nodded. Fine. 2 guards. But they stay at a distance. I want privacy with my wife. His tone made it clear he expected to berate me further away from witnesses. Rowan selected 2 young guards, men who would follow orders without question. We ride to the northern cliffs, Aldrich announced. Best view of the ocean at night. My mouth went dry. He was choosing the location himself. We had not even needed to suggest it. The ride through the forest was surreal. Moonless night meant torches were necessary, creating dancing shadows between the trees. Aldrich rode ahead, weaving slightly in his saddle, singing drinking songs off-key. The 2 guards rode behind us, far enough back to give privacy as ordered. And Rowan had volunteered to scout ahead, ostensibly to ensure the path was safe, which meant he was already at the cliffs, waiting. Aldrich ignored me for most of the ride, but occasionally he would turn and make some cutting remark about my appearance, my failure to produce an heir, my general uselessness. I barely heard him. All my focus was on what was coming, on the moment when everything would change. The forest opened onto the cliff path. Even in darkness, the space felt vast, the ocean stretching endlessly beyond the edge. The sound of waves crashing against rocks far below provided a constant rhythm, like the world's heartbeat. Aldrich dismounted clumsily, nearly fell, caught himself. "You two!" he barked at the guards. "Wait here. I want to speak with my wife privately." "Your Majesty, that may not be wise," one guard began. "Are you questioning your king?" Aldrich's voice went dangerous. "Wait, here. If I need you, I will call." The guards exchanged glances but obeyed, staying with the horses at the forest edge. I dismounted more gracefully, my wolf's balance keeping me steady even though my human heart was trying to break through my chest. Aldrich walked toward the cliff edge, his steps unsteady. I followed slowly, staying several feet back. The wind was stronger here, whipping my hair around my face, carrying the salt smell of ocean and the distant cries of night birds. "Beautiful, is it not?" Aldrich said, staring out at nothing. The darkness was absolute, no moon to illuminate the water below. Sometimes I come here and think about jumping, just to see what it feels like, flying before the fall. "Why do you not?" The words escaped before I could stop them. He turned, looked at me with something almost like interest. "Would you miss me?" "No," I said honestly. There was no point in lying anymore. He laughed, genuinely amused for once. "At least you are honest now. Too late, but honest." He took a step closer to the edge, rocks skittering under his boots. "I never wanted to marry you, you know. Your father forced the alliance, said it was the only way to stop the war. I agreed because it was politically wise, not because I wanted some naive girl who thought marriage was a fairy tale." "I know," I said. "You made that clear from the beginning. Did you really think chocolate cakes would change things? That learning my language or redecorating rooms would make me love you?" He shook his head. "Love is for poets and fools. I am a king. Kings marry for advantage, fuck for pleasure, and love no one." "Then we both got what we deserved," I replied. "A loveless marriage that benefits no one. Finally, we agree on something." He turned back toward the void, took another step closer. The edge was less than 2 feet from his boots now. This was it. The moment. I was supposed to push him. That was the plan. Walk up behind him, one quick shove, and it would be over. An accident. A tragedy. Freedom. But I could not move. Could not make my body do what my mind commanded. Because pushing someone off a cliff, even someone you hate, even someone who has destroyed you piece by piece, that is murder. Premeditated. Intentional. Evil. "Why are you so quiet?" Aldrich asked, glancing back at me. "No more clever responses?" "I am admiring the view," I managed to say. "The view?" He laughed, spreading his arms wide, encompassing the darkness. "There is nothing to see, just black ocean and blacker sky. The whole world is void tonight." He stumbled slightly, caught himself. "Rather fitting, do you not think? The void of our marriage made visible." He took another step back, toward me and away from the edge. For a moment I thought he would walk past me, return to the horses, and I would have failed. All the planning, all the risk, all the moral compromise, for nothing. Then his boot landed on moss. The same moss that had sent me plummeting, the same treacherous, slick, invisible killer growing in the shadows where torchlight did not reach. His leg shot out from under him. He flailed, arms pinwheeling, trying to catch balance that was already lost. His hand reached out. Toward me, I realized. Reaching for me to save him. I had shifter reflexes, enhanced speed, strength, reaction time. I could have caught his hand easily, could have pulled him back from the edge, could have saved him. I stood completely still. Our eyes met for one endless moment. I saw realization dawn on his face, understanding that I was not going to help, that I was choosing to let him fall. "Rose," he began. Then he was gone, falling backward into darkness, his scream cutting through the night. The sound seemed to last forever, Dopplering down as he plummeted, then a sickening crunch of impact, then silence. I could not move, could not breathe, could not process what had just happened. I had not pushed him, but I had not saved him either. Was that murder? What was the moral difference between killing and letting die? Help! The scream tore from my throat before I consciously decided to make it. Someone help! The king! He fell! Rowan appeared first, materializing from wherever he had been waiting in the darkness. The two guards came running, torches bobbing wildly. I was on my knees at the cliff edge, genuinely sobbing, shock and horror overwhelming every other emotion. "What happened?" Rowan demanded, all professional concern. "He slipped," I gasped. "The moss. He slipped and I could not. I tried to reach him, but "Stay back, Your Majesty," Rowan ordered, pulling me away from the edge. "To the guards. One of you ride back for help. The other, help me search for a way down." I knelt on the cold stone while they worked. Rowan found a place where the cliff face was less steep, used rope to rappel down. I could not see him in the darkness, could only hear the scrape of boots on rock. The weight felt eternal. When he climbed back up, his face was grim. "He is dead, Your Majesty. The fall broke his neck. Death would have been instant." The words should have brought relief. Instead, they brought crushing weight. Dead. I had let him die. I had chosen his death. There was no going back from this. The guard Rowan had sent for help returned with more men, including the captain of the guard and the royal physician. They descended with more rope and torches, brought the body back up. I forced myself to look at Aldrich's corpse when they laid it on the path. His neck was bent at an unnatural angle. Blood matted his hair. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. Dead. Completely and irreversibly dead. "Your Majesty," the physician said gently, "perhaps you should return to the palace. This is no sight for a queen." "He was my husband," I said numbly. "I should be with him." "You have been through trauma," Rowan said, his voice professional, but his eyes meeting mine with meaning. "You witnessed a terrible accident. Let us handle the body. You need rest." I nodded, because that was what a shocked, traumatized widow would do. Let them lead me to Luna. Let them help me mount. Rode back to the palace in a daze while guards carried Aldrich's body behind us. The castle erupted in chaos when we arrived. Servants wailing, nobles gathering in clusters, whispering, the Queen Mother collapsing in theatrical grief. Through it all, I played my part perfectly, the devastated widow, too shocked to speak coherently, trembling and pale and broken. They put me to bed with sleeping draughts. I pretended to drink them, then poured the liquid into a potted plant when the physician turned away. I needed to be alert, needed to hear what was being said. Through my door, I heard the investigations beginning. Guards questioned, stories compared. Everything I had said matching what the guards had seen. The king walking to the edge, slipping, falling before anyone could react. "An accident," I heard the chancellor say. "Tragic, but clearly an accident. The king was known to ride drunk. It was only a matter of time before something like this happened. I should have felt relieved. The plan had worked. We would not be suspected. But all I felt was a crushing, suffocating weight settling into my chest. I had let a man die, watched him fall and chosen not to save him. And now I was lying in bed pretending to grieve, while listening to people call his death an accident. 3 days passed in a blur of funeral preparations. The investigation continued, routine and thorough. Then on the 4th day, a guard came to my chambers with news. "Your Majesty, the investigators have found something unusual. Evidence of someone at the cliffs days before the king's death. Disturbed rocks, bloodstains, signs of recent injury." My blood froze. They had found evidence of my practice fall. They traced the blood trail to a woodsman's cabin. A man named Cassian. He's been brought in for questioning. No, this could not be happening. But it was. And as I sat in the gallery watching Cassian's interrogation, I realized with horrible clarity that Rowan had been right. We needed a scapegoat. And Cassian, kind and honest and completely innocent, was perfectly positioned to take our blame. "You were at the cliffs a week before the king's death?" the interrogator asked. "Yes," Cassian answered honestly. "I rescued an injured wolf, brought her back to my cabin to heal." "An injured wolf," the interrogator repeated slowly. "And did this wolf seem unusual to you?" Cassian hesitated. I could see him struggling between honesty and the promise he had made to protect my secret. "She was special," he finally said. "Intelligent. I suspected she was a shifter." "A shifter," the interrogator leaned forward. "And did you later discover the identity of this shifter?" Another hesitation. Then, because Cassian was incapable of lying, "Yes. She shifted to human form on the 3rd day. It was the queen." The room exploded into whispers. The interrogator smiled, smelling blood. "So you admit that Her Majesty was at the cliffs alone, practicing something dangerous enough to injure herself, and you kept this secret. Why?" "She asked me to," Cassian said simply. "She did not want to worry the palace. Or perhaps," the interrogator suggested, "you were obsessed with her, watched her from the forest, followed her to the cliffs, sabotaged the path so that her husband would die and you could have her for yourself." "No," Cassian's face went pale. "That is not. I would never." "You admit to being at the cliffs, to helping the queen in secret. to keeping that secret even from the king himself. What are we to conclude, except that you conspired in his death? I saved an injured animal. Cassian's voice broke. That is all I did. I am not a murderer. But the evidence was damning. His presence at the cliffs, his secret keeping, his connection to me, every innocent action twisted into guilt. The trial lasted 2 days. I sat in the royal box and watched a good man be destroyed by my choices, watched him insist on his innocence, while guards testified about the disturbed moss, the evidence of tampering, watched him look at me once with eyes that held not accusation but sadness, as if he understood and forgave me anyway. The verdict was inevitable, guilty of conspiracy to commit regicide, but the council was merciful. There was not enough evidence for execution. Instead, life imprisonment. Cassian would spend the rest of his days in a cell, paying for a crime he did not commit. When they led him away in chains, he looked at me one last time. His lips moved, forming words I could barely make out. I understand. That night, Rowan came to my chambers through the secret passages, pulled me into his arms. It is over, he whispered. We are free. No one suspects us. In a few months after proper mourning, we can be together openly. I should have felt victorious, should have felt the relief of freedom finally won. Instead, all I felt was the crushing weight of what I had done. Cassian is innocent, I said into Rowan's chest. Cassian is alive, Rowan corrected. That is more than many could say, and in time, we will find a way to free him quietly. This is not permanent, but we both knew it was a lie. Freeing a man convicted of regicide would raise too many questions. Cassian would rot in prison because I had chosen to let a drunk man fall off a cliff. I became a murderer without ever dirtying my hands, and an innocent man was paying the price for my freedom. That was the truth I would carry for the rest of my life, heavy as any crown. Freedom tastes like ashes when bought with an innocent man's suffering. I was Queen Regent of Monaco, ruler in my own right now that my husband was dead. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was dying again, just in a different way. 6 months had passed since Aldrich fell from those cliffs. 6 months since I stood motionless and let him plummet to his death. 6 months since Cassian was locked away for a crime he did not commit. The funeral had been appropriately grand, the mourning period observed with perfect propriety, and I had played the grieving widow so convincingly that even I almost believed it. But at night, when the palace slept, and I was alone in chambers that had once been my prison and were now my throne, I could not escape what I had become. I governed well. This surprised everyone, including myself. Turns out that 3 years of watching an incompetent tyrant rule had taught me exactly what not to do. I implemented reforms that helped the common people, negotiated trade agreements that strengthened our economy, reduced taxes on the poor and increased them on the wealthy nobles who could afford it, created schools for children who had never dreamed of education. I was becoming the queen that Monaco deserved, and every single accomplishment felt hollow because it was built on blood and lies. The nightmares started immediately. Every night, I relived that moment on the cliff. Sometimes Aldrich reached for me and I caught his hand, pulled him back, and he beat me to death for daring to save him. Sometimes I pushed him instead of watching him fall, and his blood covered my hands like war paint. Sometimes Cassian stood beside me and asked quietly why I was letting him suffer for my sins. I would wake gasping, sheets soaked with sweat, my wolf howling inside me with anguish. The mate bond with Rowan should have been comfort, but even that was tainted. Every time he touched me, I felt Cassian's chains. Every time we kissed in secret, I tasted the lie that had imprisoned an innocent man. We still could not reveal our relationship publicly. Too scandalous, too soon after the king's death. Rowan visited my chambers through hidden passages, and we made love in darkness and silence, and it felt more like penance than passion. The mate bond sang between us, demanding we be together, but the song was discordant now, broken. I lasted 3 months before I had to see him. Had to see what my choices had cost. The palace dungeons were deep beneath the castle, carved from ancient stone that wept moisture and despair. I went alone, hooded and cloaked, telling my guards I needed privacy for grief. They believed me. Everyone believed the heartbroken widow queen. The jailer led me to Cassian's cell without question. Queens could go wherever they wished in their own palace, even into hell. Cassian sat on a stone bench in the corner of his cell, thinner than I remembered, his beard grown long and unkempt. But his eyes were still clear. Still kind. That was somehow worse than if he had been broken. Your Majesty, he said softly, standing and bowing as much as his chains would allow. Please do not, I whispered, pulling back my hood. Do not bow to me, not after what I have done to you. He studied my face for a long moment. You look tired. Are you sleeping? The question was so absurd, him asking about my welfare while he rotted in prison for my crime, that I nearly laughed. No, I do not sleep well anymore. Guilt is a harsh companion, he said, not unkindly. I know. I lived with it for 3 years after my wife died, wondering if I could have saved her, if I had noticed something sooner, called the midwife faster. Guilt can eat you alive if you let it. You are innocent, I said, the words breaking. You saved my life and I let them blame you. I stood there and watched them convict you and said nothing. I know. The simple acknowledgement was more devastating than any accusation. Then why are you not angry? Why do you not hate me? Cassian moved closer to the bars, as close as his chains allowed. Because I understand. You were trapped, suffering. You found a way out and I became collateral damage. It is not fair. It is not right. But I understand the desperation that drives people to terrible choices. Understanding is not the same as forgiving, I said. No, he agreed. But I do forgive you. Not because you deserve it, but because I choose to. Hate would make this cell smaller. Forgiveness makes it bearable. I fell to my knees on the cold stone floor, tears streaming down my face. I am so sorry. I am so desperately sorry. If I could trade places with you, I would. Would you? His voice was gentle but probing. Would you really give up your crown, your power, your freedom, to save a stranger you barely know? I wanted to say yes immediately, but honesty had cost him his freedom, so I owed him honesty in return. I do not know, and that terrifies me. At least you are honest now. He sat back down on his bench. Most people would lie, would make grand promises they have no intention of keeping. You tell the truth, even when it makes you look terrible. That is worth something. Is it worth your life rotting away in here? My life was rotting away in that cabin, alone with my grief and memories. At least here I have clarity. I know exactly what I am paying for, even if I did not commit the crime. There is strange peace in that. I wiped my eyes, trying to compose myself. I will find a way to free you. I am queen now. I have power. I will— You will do nothing, Cassian interrupted. Freeing me would raise questions you cannot answer, would unravel the entire story. You would destroy yourself trying to save me, and I do not want that weight on my conscience. So I should just leave you here, let you sacrifice your life for my sins. You should live, Your Majesty. You should be the queen this kingdom needs. Make my suffering count for something. If you waste this opportunity wallowing in guilt, then yes, my imprisonment becomes meaningless. But if you use your freedom to help people, to create change, to be the ruler Monaco deserves, then maybe there is purpose in my pain. I stared at him, this impossibly good man who was offering me absolution I had not earned. I do not deserve your forgiveness. No one deserves forgiveness. That is the nature of grace. It is given freely or not at all. He smiled sadly. Go, Your Majesty. Rule well. That is the only payment I ask for my silence. I left the dungeons feeling worse than when I entered. He had forgiven me, which somehow made the guilt more crushing. I did not want his grace. I wanted justice. I wanted the world to be fair, to punish the guilty and free the innocent. But the world did not work that way, and I had made it less fair by my choices. That night, Rowan came to my chambers as usual, found me sitting by the window, staring out at nothing. You are distracted lately, he said, wrapping his arms around me from behind. What troubles you, my love? Cassian, I said simply. His arms tightened. Rose, we have discussed this. There is nothing to be done. He is serving his sentence. In time, people will forget, and perhaps we can arrange early release. But for now, he rots in prison for our crime. I finished. Say it plainly, Rowan. Stop hiding behind euphemisms. We murdered the king, and let an innocent man take the blame. I murdered no one, Rowan said carefully. The king fell. It was an accident. An accident we engineered. An accident we planned. An accident we allowed to happen. I pulled away from him, turning to face him. We are murderers. Let us at least be honest about what we are. Fine, Rowan snapped, patience cracking. We are murderers. We killed a tyrant who was destroying you. And we allowed a man to be imprisoned so that we could be free. I am not proud of it, but I am not ashamed either. Cassian is alive. That is more mercy than Aldrich showed you. Is that the standard now? We are better than Aldrich, so our sins are acceptable? What do you want, Rose? Rowan demanded. What do you want me to say? That I regret it? I do not. I would do it again. I would sacrifice 100 Cassians to save you from one more day of Aldrich's abuse. The words hung between us like a chasm opening. That is the difference between us, I said slowly. You can justify any sin if the end serves your purpose. But I am drowning in what we have done. Every day I feel more of my soul slipping away. Then what? Rowan asked, his voice hard now. What do you propose? Confess? Free Cassian and damn us both? Throw away everything we have built? Yes, I whispered, and hearing myself say it made it real. Yes, that is exactly what I propose. His face went white. You cannot be serious. I visited him today. Cassian. He forgave me, Rowan. He sat in that cell in chains and offered me grace I do not deserve. And I realized, I do not want to be a queen who wears a crown bought with an innocent man's suffering. I do not want to rule a kingdom while pretending I am not a murderer. I do not want to live a lie anymore. You are tired, Rowan said, trying for calm, grieving, not thinking clearly. Once you rest. I am thinking more clearly than I have in months, I interrupted. This is wrong. What we did, what we are doing, it is wrong, and I cannot live with it anymore. If you confess, you lose everything, Rowan said desperately. The crown, your power, your freedom. You could be executed, Rose. Regicide is punishable by death, I know, but at least I would have my soul back. And what about us? His voice cracked. What about the mate bond? What about everything we sacrificed to be together? I looked at this man, my fated mate, the one the moon goddess had chosen for me, and I realized something that broke my heart. The mate bond makes us soulmates, Rowan. It does not make us the same person. It does not mean we share the same morality or values or lines we will not cross. You can live with what we did. I cannot. That is not a failure of the bond. That is simply who we are. So you would throw me away? Throw us away? For what? For a woodsman you barely know? Not for him, I said softly. For me. So I can look at myself in a mirror without hating what I see. So I can sleep without nightmares. So I can rule, or not rule, with honor instead of lies. Rowan stared at me for a long moment, and I watched something die in his eyes. If you do this, I cannot follow you. I will not confess. I will not give up my position, my life, my future for your guilt. I know, I said, and I do not expect you to. This is my choice, my burden to carry. If you confess, you implicate me as well. I will be questioned, investigated. Everything we have built will be destroyed. Then lie, I said. Tell them you knew nothing, that I acted alone. I will corroborate it. You can survive this. By letting my mate sacrifice herself? His laugh was bitter. What kind of man does that make me? The kind who chooses self-preservation over honor. There is no shame in that. It is just who you are. I moved closer, touched his face gently. I love you, Rowan. The mate bond is real, and it will always be part of me. But love is not enough, not when the cost is my conscience. He caught my hand, pressed it against his cheek. Do not do this. Please. We can find another way. We can free Cassian somehow. I will figure it out. Just do not throw yourself away. There is no other way. Any attempt to free him raises questions that point to the truth. Better the truth comes from me willingly than be discovered later. I kissed him gently, tasting salt from tears I had not realized I was crying. I am sorry, for all of it, but especially for pulling you into this, and then not having the courage to follow through. Courage. He pulled back, anger flashing. This is not courage. This is stupidity. Self-destruction masquerading as nobility. Perhaps, I agreed, but it is mine to choose. He left without another word, and I knew I would never feel his arms around me again. The mate bond stretched between us, aching with the distance, but I did not call him back. Some prices have to be paid. This was mine. 3 days later, I called an emergency assembly of the royal council and the noble houses. Every person of importance in Monaco gathered in the throne room, whispering speculation about what the young queen might announce. New taxes, a marriage proposal, war. I sat on the throne, Aldrich's throne that had become mine, and looked out at the sea of faces, some sympathetic, some scheming, all curious. I stood, removing the crown from my head and holding it in both hands. The weight of it had never felt more obvious. "I have called you here to confess a crime," I began, and the room went silent. 6 months ago, King Aldrich died on the northern cliffs. The official story is that he fell accidentally, drunk and careless. That story is incomplete. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw Rowan at the back, his face pale but expressionless. The truth is that I planned my husband's death, not alone. I had help, but I was the architect. I studied the cliffs. I tested the fall. I accompanied him that night knowing he would not return. When he slipped on the moss, I had the ability to save him. Enhanced reflexes, shifter speed. I could have caught his hand. I chose not to. The murmurs became shouts. Guards moved toward the throne, uncertain. Lady Helena, my advisor, looked horrified. The council members were on their feet, chaos erupting. Furthermore, I continued, speaking over the noise, a man named Cassian currently sits in prison for this crime. He is innocent. He saved my life when I injured myself practicing the route. He kept my secret because I asked him to, not because he was involved in any plot. His imprisonment is my fault. His suffering is my sin. Your Majesty, the Chancellor interrupted, you are not required to. I abdicate the throne, I said clearly, effective immediately. I am no longer your queen. I am simply Rose Silverfang, a woman who committed regicide through negligence, if not direct action, and who allowed an innocent man to be punished in her place. I submit myself to royal justice. I placed the crown on the throne and descended the steps. Guards rushed forward, grabbed my arms. Someone was shouting about legal proceedings, someone else about due process. Through it all, I felt strangely calm, lighter than I had felt in months. As they led me away, I caught Rowan's eyes across the room. He looked devastated, betrayed. I mouthed, "I am sorry," and let them take me to the same dungeons where Cassian waited. The trial lasted 2 weeks. It became the most talked about event in Monaco's history, a queen confessing to killing her king. The scandal was enormous, the political implications catastrophic. The evidence was damning because I provided all of it, every detail of the plan, every moment of the execution. I left out only one thing, Rowan's involvement. When they questioned me about accomplices, I lied and said I acted alone, that Cassian knew nothing, that everyone else was innocent. Rowan, to his credit, did not contradict me. He testified that he had noticed nothing unusual about that night, that the king's death had appeared to be a tragic accident. His lies were more convincing than my truths had ever been. The surprise came when Cassian was brought from his cell to testify. I thought he would condemn me, would take revenge for the months he had suffered. Instead, he looked at the judges and said, "Queen Rose, the former queen, suffered unspeakable abuse for years. I saw the evidence of it when I cared for her injuries. She was a woman drowning in despair, seeing no way out except through desperate action. What she did was wrong, but it was born of survival, not malice. If anyone deserves mercy in this proceeding, it is her. She has confessed when she could have remained silent. She has freed me when it would have been easier to let me rot. That takes more courage than I possess." His words moved the court. Public opinion, already sympathetic to a young queen who had endured an abusive marriage, turned further in my favor. There were calls for full pardon, for understanding, for mercy over justice. The verdict took 3 days to reach, guilty of conspiracy to commit regicide and obstruction of justice. But the sentence shocked everyone. Exile for 5 years, not execution. The judges ruled that confession, contrition, and the circumstances of abuse warranted leniency. I would lose my crown, my title, my home, but I would keep my life. Rowan came to see me the night before my exile began. We met in a private chamber, guards waiting outside. "You should hate me," I said. "I do," he replied, "and I love you. The mate bond does not care about betrayal or politics. It just is. I had to tell the truth. I know. That is who you are." He touched my face gently, and the bond sang one last time between us. "I will not wait for you. 5 years is too long, and we have broken something that cannot be repaired, but I will never forget you. My mate, my queen, my greatest failure. I am sorry," I whispered. "So am I." He left without kissing me goodbye. The mate bond stretched and stretched as he walked away, but it did not break. Those do not break, even when love does. The next morning, they put me on a ship bound for the Northern Territories. I stood on deck as Monaco disappeared behind me, the palace growing smaller until it was just a white dot on the cliffs. I had lost everything: crown, power, love, home. But as the sun rose over the ocean, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, I felt something I had not felt in years: peace. I was free, truly free. Not the freedom I had imagined when planning Aldrich's death. That had been an illusion, a cage with prettier bars. This was real freedom. The freedom that comes from owning your choices, accepting their consequences, and knowing you finally chose honor over convenience. The price had been everything, but everything had been worth it to get my soul back. 5 years passed like water flowing over stones, slowly reshaping everything it touched. I lived in a small village on the northern coast, working as a healer and midwife. No one knew I had once been queen. I was simply Rose, the woman who delivered babies and treated fevers and asked no questions about anyone's past. I learned what it meant to be ordinary, to work with my hands, to earn bread through labor, to sleep dreamlessly because my conscience was clean. The mate bond with Rowan faded to background noise, always present, but no longer demanding. My wolf found peace in simplicity. News from Monaco reached me occasionally. Rowan had married a suitable noblewoman, a political match that strengthened his position. He was captain of the royal guard now, powerful and respected. I felt no jealousy, only distant hope that he had found contentment. The new king, Aldrich's younger brother, was proving to be competent and fair. The reforms I had started were continuing. Monaco was thriving, and Cassian had been released quietly a year after my exile. He returned to his woodsman's cabin and resumed his simple life. I received one letter from him, short and simple. Thank you for the truth. I am free. Be well. C. When my 5 years ended, I returned to Monaco not as queen, but as citizen. The ship docked at the same harbor I had left from, but everything felt different. Or perhaps I was different. A crowd waited at the port, not hostile but curious. The fallen queen returning. What did she look like now? Had exile broken her or healed her? Cassian was there. I saw him at the edge of the crowd, older and grayer but smiling. When I descended the gangplank, he came forward and embraced me like an old friend. Welcome home, he said simply. Is it home? I asked. It can be, if you want it to be. The new king had granted me a small house in the city, a pension, my titles restored, but not my crown. I would never rule again, but I could live here if I chose. I chose. Over the following months, I built a new life, opened a clinic for the poor, taught healing to anyone who wanted to learn, lived quietly and purposefully, making amends in small ways that would never balance the scales, but helped me sleep at night. Cassian became a friend, visiting often to share meals and conversation. Never lovers, never romantic, just two people who had survived the same storm and understood each other's scars. I saw Rowan once, from a distance, at a royal procession. His wife was beautiful and kind-looking. He seemed content. Our eyes met briefly across the crowd. He nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement and closure. I nodded back. The mate bond was still there, would always be there, but it no longer controlled us. We had found other ways to be whole. Years later, someone asked me if I regretted confessing, if I wished I had kept silent, kept my crown, kept my power. I thought about it honestly, about the 5 years in exile, about everything I had lost, about Rowan and the life we might have had, about the power and influence I could have wielded. No, I finally said. I lost a crown of gold, but gained a crown of thorns that I wear with honor. And thorns, my friend, are more honest than gold, because that is what I learned on those cliffs 6 years ago, standing between a falling king and a rising moon. Freedom is not the absence of consequences. It is the courage to face them. Justice is not revenge dressed in prettier clothes. It is choosing truth even when lies would be easier. And redemption is not given. It is earned one day, one choice, one honest breath at a time. I was Rose Silverfang. I had been queen. I had been murderer. I had been coward and confessor in exile. Now I was simply myself, flawed and forgiven and finally free. That crown, invisible, painful, earned, was the only one I would ever wear again, and it fit perfectly. I sat in the royal box overlooking the courtroom and watched them destroy an innocent man with my lies. The seat was carved mahogany, cushioned in royal blue velvet, positioned to give the monarch perfect view of justice being administered in their name. I had never sat here before. Aldrich had never allowed me to witness trials, said it was too brutal for a delicate queen. Now I understood why. Justice, when it is actually injustice dressed in legal robes, is unbearable to witness. The courtroom was packed. Every noble who could claim a reason to attend had done so. The trial of the man who allegedly murdered the king was the scandal of the century. They filled the benches, whispering behind fans and gloved hands, watching the proceedings like it was theater designed for their entertainment. Cassian stood in the prisoner's dock, chains around his wrists and ankles, wearing the rough brown tunic they gave to accused criminals. He looked smaller than I remembered, diminished by the circumstances but somehow not broken. His beard had been trimmed, his hair cut short in preparation for trial. They wanted him to look presentable, civilized, so his guilt would be more shocking. The prosecutor was Lord Bartholomew, a man known for his ruthlessness and his perfect conviction record. He stood before the judges, 3 elderly men in black robes who held Cassian's fate in their wrinkled hands, and laid out his case with the precision of a butcher selecting which cut of meat to make first. "Gentlemen of the court," Bartholomew began, his voice carrying to every corner of the room, "we are here to examine the death of King Aldrich, a tragedy that shook our kingdom to its foundations. The official story has been that His Majesty died in a terrible accident, a drunken fall from the northern cliffs, but evidence has come to light that suggests a more sinister truth. I felt Rowan's presence beside me before I saw him. He had positioned himself just behind my chair, close enough that I could feel the heat of him, the mate bond humming between us like a plucked string. His hand rested on the back of my seat, not touching me, but claiming me nonetheless. Evidence collected at the scene reveals that someone had been at those cliffs days before the king's death," Bartholomew continued. "Disturbed earth, bloodstains, signs of recent injury and repeated visits. We traced this evidence to the cabin of one Cassian Thorne, a woodsman who supplies timber to the palace. Cassian's appointed defender, a young lawyer named Marcus, who looked terrified to be involved in such a high-profile case, stood to object. The evidence proves only that my client was at the cliffs, not that he had any malicious intent. Patience, young man," Bartholomew said with false kindness. "We shall establish intent momentarily. First, let us hear from the accused himself." He turned to Cassian. "Mr. Thorne, you admit to being at the cliffs 1 week before the king's death. What were you doing there?" Cassian's voice was steady when he answered. "I heard a wolf howling in distress. I followed the sound and found her injured on a ledge. I rescued her and brought her to my cabin to heal." "A wolf," Bartholomew repeated slowly. "And did this wolf seem ordinary to you?" Cassian hesitated. I held my breath, knowing what was coming, unable to stop it. "No," Cassian admitted. "She was clearly a shifter, more intelligent than a normal wolf. I suspected she was someone of importance." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Bartholomew smiled like a cat who had caught a particularly fat mouse. "A shifter of importance," he said. "And did you later discover this shifter's identity?" Another hesitation. Cassian's eyes found mine in the royal box. I saw apology in them, and resignation. He knew what his honesty would cost, but he was incapable of lying, even to save himself. "Yes," he said quietly. "On the 3rd day, she shifted to human form. It was Queen Rose." The whispers became shouts. The judges banged their gavels, demanding order. I sat frozen, my face carefully composed into an expression of neutral concern, while inside, I was screaming. "So let me ensure I understand correctly," Bartholomew said, speaking over the dying noise. "You, a common woodsman, spent 3 days alone in your cabin with Her Majesty the Queen, in secret, while she was injured and vulnerable, and you never reported this to anyone at the palace." "She asked me not to," Cassian replied. "She said she didn't want to worry the court, that she had been testing her wolf form after years confined to human shape, and had fallen accidentally." "How convenient," Bartholomew purred. "The Queen asks you to keep a secret, and you obey without question. Tell me, Mr. Thorne, did you develop feelings for Her Majesty during those 3 days?" "Objection." Marcus stood quickly. "The witness's feelings are not relevant to—" "Overruled," the head judge said. "The question goes to motive. Answer, Mr. Thorne." Cassian looked uncomfortable. I felt sympathy for her. She had clearly been through trauma. But romantic feelings? No. She is the Queen. I am a woodsman. Such thoughts would be inappropriate. Inappropriate. Bartholomew seized on the word. Yes, indeed. Inappropriate for a commoner to desire a queen. Inappropriate to fantasize about her being free to choose her own companions. Inappropriate to want the king dead, so that barrier might be removed. That's not... I never wanted... Cassian's composure cracked slightly. Let me present another interpretation of events, Bartholomew said, turning to address the judges directly. Cassian Thorne encountered Queen Rose at the cliffs. Perhaps he had been watching her, following her, developing an obsession. When she fell, he saw an opportunity. He rescued her, took her to his isolated cabin, earned her trust. Then, with intimate knowledge of the cliffs and the Queen's visits there, he sabotaged the path, loosened rocks, made certain sections more treacherous, all in preparation for the king's next drunken ride. No, Cassian said desperately. I did nothing to that cliff. I only helped an injured animal. An injured animal who turned out to be the Queen, Bartholomew shot back. How extraordinarily fortunate for you. And then, days later, the king dies on the exact same cliffs. Another extraordinary coincidence. The prosecutor called witnesses. A servant testified that she had seen Cassian at the palace once, delivering wood, and that he had stared at the Queen during a public appearance with unsettling intensity. A guard swore he had seen signs of someone tampering with the cliff path the day after Cassian's rescue of me. Another woodsman claimed Cassian had spoken strangely about the Queen, though when pressed for specifics, his story became vague and contradictory. Every piece of evidence was circumstantial. Every testimony was interpretation and assumption. But together, they built a narrative that made a certain terrible sense. Obsessed commoner falls in love with abused queen, eliminates the obstacle between them. The only testimony that did not fit this narrative was mine. I was called to the stand on the second day of trial. Your Majesty, Bartholomew said with exaggerated deference, please describe the night of the king's death. I recited the story we had crafted. Aldrich wanting to ride to the cliffs, me accompanying him. The drunken insults during the ride, arriving at the cliffs, the king dismissing the guards, walking toward the edge, the slip, the fall, my screams for help. Did you see anyone else at the cliffs that night? Bartholomew asked. No, only the king, myself, and the guards who waited at a distance. Had you mentioned to anyone that you would be riding to the cliffs that night? No, it was the king's spontaneous decision. So Mr. Thorne could not have known to be there, lying in wait. No, there is no way he could have known. I met Cassian's eyes as I said this, trying to communicate something. Apology, gratitude, desperation. He looked back at me without judgment. And yet, Bartholomew said, the king died on cliffs that Mr. Thorne knew intimately, cliffs he had visited repeatedly in the days before, cliffs where he had rescued you and formed what he might have perceived as a bond. Do you not find that suspicious, Your Majesty? It was a trap. If I defended Cassian too strongly, I looked complicit. If I agreed with the prosecution, I condemned him. I chose my words carefully. I find it tragic, I said. Cassian Thorne saved my life when I was injured. He showed me kindness and asked nothing in return. The idea that he would use that knowledge to harm the king seems incompatible with the man I met. The man you met, Bartholomew repeated, in his cabin, alone, for 3 days. Perhaps you do not know him as well as you think, Your Majesty. Perhaps he showed you only what he wanted you to see. There was nothing I could say to that without making things worse. I was dismissed from the stand, returned to the royal box, and felt the weight of Cassian's fate settling on my shoulders like stones. The trial continued for 3 more days. Expert after expert testified about the cliffs, the moss patterns, the likelihood of accidental versus intentional death. Cassian's defender tried valiantly to create reasonable doubt, but circumstantial evidence is like water, individually weak, collectively overwhelming. On the final day, Cassian was allowed to speak in his own defense. I am a simple man, he said, standing in chains before the judges. I live alone in the forest. I cut wood. I mind my own business. When I heard an animal in pain, I helped, because that is what decent people do. When I discovered that animal was the Queen, I kept her secret because she asked me to. That is all I did. I did not sabotage any cliffs. I did not murder any king. I am not obsessed with Her Majesty. I am simply a man who helped someone in need, and is now being punished for that kindness. His speech was simple and honest, and utterly unconvincing to ears trained to hear conspiracy. The judges deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned, the head judge read the verdict in a voice devoid of emotion. On the charge of conspiracy to commit regicide, we find the defendant guilty. While we lack direct evidence of the defendant physically causing the king's death, the preponderance of circumstantial evidence suggests planning and intent. However, Given the lack of direct proof and the defendant's previous good character, we are inclined toward mercy. Mercy? The word made me want to laugh hysterically. The sentence is life imprisonment without possibility of parole for 20 years. The defendant will be held in the royal dungeons, his property seized by the crown, his name stricken from all records of honor. May God have mercy on his soul. The gavel fell. The sound was like bones breaking. Cassian stood very still for a moment, absorbing the reality that his life had just ended, even though he would continue breathing. Then guards moved to lead him away. Before they could, he turned and looked directly at me. Our eyes met across the crowded courtroom. I expected rage, accusation, hatred. Instead, his face held only profound sadness. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice carrying in the sudden silence. I only wanted to help. The words broke something inside me. I could not breathe, could not think. My vision tunneled until all I could see was Cassian's face, gentle and resigned and accepting his fate with more grace than I possessed. Then the guards pulled him away, and he was gone, swallowed by the dungeons that would be his home, until he was an old man or dead, whichever came first. I felt Rowan's hand on my shoulder, heavy and possessive. "It is the price of freedom," he murmured, too quiet for anyone else to hear. I turned to look at him. "The price is too high. He is alive," Rowan said with the calm of someone who has rationalized every angle. "That is more than many could say. And in time, when memories fade and attention moves elsewhere, we can arrange for his release. A pardon. Early release for good behavior. This is not permanent." I wanted desperately to believe him, wanted to think that this was temporary, that we would fix this, that Cassian's suffering had an expiration date, but I knew it was a lie. A comfortable fiction we told ourselves so we could sleep at night. Freeing a man convicted of killing the king would raise too many questions, shine too much light on corners that needed to stay dark. Cassian would rot in that dungeon because I had chosen to let my husband die. That was the truth, stark and unforgiving. "Come," Rowan said, helping me to stand. "You need rest. This has been traumatic for you. Traumatic for me. As if I was the victim here. As if watching an innocent man be convicted was the same as being that innocent man. But I let Rowan lead me from the courtroom, because I did not know what else to do. The crowd parted for us, some faces sympathetic, others calculating. The young, widowed queen, so brave to witness justice being done. If they only knew. A week later, they crowned me Queen Regent. The ceremony was smaller than my wedding had been, but no less ornate. I wore a gown of deep purple, mourning color for Monaco, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light like tears. My hair was dressed elaborately, woven with pearls and diamonds that had belonged to Aldrich's mother, and on my head, they placed the crown. The same crown Aldrich had worn, heavy gold worked into intricate patterns of wolves and roses, studded with gems that represented Monaco's wealth and power. The crown of the man who had destroyed me piece by piece for 3 years. The crown I had wanted so desperately when I married him, thinking it represented love and partnership and happily ever after. Now I knew better. The crown was just metal, heavy metal that pressed down on your head and reminded you with every moment that you wore it what you had sacrificed to claim it. Do you, Rose Silverfang, swear to rule Monaco with wisdom and justice, to protect its people and preserve its traditions, to serve faithfully until death or abdication? The Archbishop asked. I do, I said, and felt the weight of the crown settle onto my head like a sentence. The crowd cheered. Nobles applauded. Musicians played triumphant fanfares. I sat on the throne, Aldrich's throne that had become mine, and accepted the homage of the court. One by one, they knelt before me, swore their loyalty, kissed my extended hand. Rowan knelt too, his amber eyes meeting mine with heat and possession, and the promise of nights to come. That night, there was a banquet to celebrate my coronation. I sat at the high table and smiled at the right moments, and pretended to eat, while courtiers congratulated me on my strength during this difficult time. They toasted my health, my wisdom, my beauty. They spoke of the bright future of Monaco under my rule. No one mentioned the man in the dungeons below us, the innocent man whose suffering had purchased my crown. When the banquet finally ended and I could retreat to my chambers, Rowan came with me through the secret passages. We had been careful since Aldrich's death, meeting only in private, maintaining the appearance of proper distance between queen and guard. But tonight, with my coronation complete and my position secure, we allowed ourselves more. He kissed me the moment the door closed, pressing me against the wall with the urgency of months of restraint. The mate bond sang at the contact, demanding more, demanding everything. His hands tangled in my hair, dislodging the crown which fell with a heavy thud to the carpet. My queen, he breathed against my lips. Finally, officially, undeniably mine. I kissed him back because the mate bond gave me no choice, because my body craved his despite everything, because some part of me still loved him. But as his mouth moved from my lips to my throat, as his hands began unlacing my gown, I tasted something wrong. Blood. Not literal blood. There was nothing physical. But I tasted it nonetheless. The metallic tang of Cassian's innocence, bleeding out in a dungeon cell while I wore a crown and kissed my lover in rooms lined with silk and gold. I pulled back suddenly, breathing hard. Rowan looked at me with confusion and frustrated desire. "What's wrong?" "I can't," I said, and even I was not sure what I meant. Can't do this? Can't pretend everything is fine? Can't ignore what we've done? Rose. He reached for me, but I stepped away. "When you kiss me," I said slowly, working out the truth as I spoke it, "I taste innocent blood between us. Every time you touch me, I feel Cassian's chains. Every moment of pleasure is poisoned by what it cost." "You're tired," Rowan said, trying for patient understanding. "Overwhelmed. The coronation, the trial, everything happening so quickly." "I am tired," I agreed. "Tired of pretending. Tired of lying. Tired of wearing a crown that was bought with an innocent man's life." "He's alive," Rowan insisted, frustration breaking through. "We've been over this. He's alive, he's safe, and eventually we'll find a way to—" "To what?" I interrupted. "To free him without implicating ourselves? To somehow undo the life sentence he received? Rowan, listen to yourself. You're not planning his release. You're planning comfortable lies to tell yourself so you can sleep at night." His face hardened. "What do you want from me, Rose? Guilt? Self-flagellation? I am sorry Cassian is suffering truly, but I am not sorry Aldrich is dead. I am not sorry you are free. I am not sorry we can finally be together. Call me selfish, call me immoral, I don't care. I would sacrifice 100 men like Cassian to save you from one more day with that monster." There it was. The fundamental difference between us laid bare. Rowan could justify anything if the ends served his purposes. His love for me was absolute, but it was also self-serving. My happiness mattered more to him than justice, than honor, than the suffering of innocence. And I had thought I could be that person too. Had thought love and freedom would be enough to silence my conscience. But I was wrong. "I can't live like this," I said quietly. "Like what? Free? Powerful? With your fated mate finally able to love you openly? Like a murderer wearing a crown?" I picked up the crown from where it had fallen, turned it over in my hands. It was beautiful and terrible. This symbol of power. "This doesn't feel like victory, Rowan. It feels like damnation." He stared at me for a long moment, and I watched something shift in his eyes. Fear, maybe. Or the first recognition that I might be serious. "Don't do anything stupid," he said carefully. "Stupid like confessing? Like freeing Cassian? Like giving up everything we've gained?" "Yes, exactly like that. Those things would be catastrophically stupid. Or maybe," I said, "they would be the first honest things I've done in months. Rose, leave, Rowan. Please. I need to think." He wanted to argue. I could see it in the set of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. But something in my face must have told him that pushing now would break something irreparable. He left without another word, and I was alone with the crown and my conscience. I did not sleep that night. Instead, I sat by the window and watched the moon track across the sky, full and bright, so different from the darkness that had hidden Aldrich's death. I thought about Cassian in his cell, staring at the same moon through bars. I thought about the kind of queen I wanted to be versus the kind I was becoming. And I thought about how sometimes the only way to truly be free is to accept the chains you've earned. By morning, I knew what I had to do. It would cost me everything. The crown, my power, probably Rowan, possibly my life. But it would give me back the one thing that mattered more than all of those combined. My soul. I was Queen Regent of Monaco. I wore the crown of the man who destroyed me, won by the fall of the man who saved me. And when my lover kissed me, I tasted innocent blood. That crown, heavy and golden and stained with lies, would have to be returned. Not because someone demanded it, but because I could not bear the weight anymore. Some prices are too high to pay. I was finally learning that lesson, though it came far too late for the man in the dungeons who had paid it for me. Freedom tastes like ash when purchased with another man's innocence. I was free. I was queen. I was a murderer. And the only thing that kept me awake at night was the question, was it worth it? 6 months had passed since that moonless night on the cliffs. 6 months since I watched Aldrich fall and chose not to save him. 6 months since Cassian was locked away for my crime. The palace had finished its official mourning period, black drapes replaced with royal blue, and I had emerged from widow's weeds to take my place as Queen Regent of Monaco. Everyone said I was thriving, the young queen who had transformed grief into governance, who had taken a throne she never expected and wielded it with surprising competence. I implemented reforms that Aldrich had blocked for years, reduced taxes on farmers, funded schools in poor districts, negotiated fair trade agreements with neighboring kingdoms. I opened the royal treasury to feed families during the harsh winter, personally visited villages to hear complaints and suggestions, created councils where common people could petition the crown directly. The nobles who had whispered that a woman could not rule, that I was too soft and emotional for politics, fell silent as Monaco prospered under my leadership. Foreign ambassadors, who came expecting a naive girl, found instead a queen who understood economics and military strategy, who negotiated with steel beneath velvet gloves. The people began calling me Rose the Just, Rose the Reformer, the queen who listened. If only they knew what their just queen had done to claim that throne. The nightmares were relentless. Every night I closed my eyes and saw Cassian's face as they led him away in chains. Sometimes in dreams he asked me why, his voice gentle and confused. Sometimes he screamed accusations while I stood frozen, unable to speak. Sometimes I was in his cell with him, and we traded places, and I felt the cold stone and iron, and understood too late what I had condemned him to. I would wake gasping, sheets tangled, my wolf howling inside me with anguish. The mate bond with Rowan pulsed constantly, offering comfort I could not accept. He came to my chambers most nights through secret passages, and we would make love in desperate silence, trying to recapture the passion that had driven us to murder. But every kiss tasted wrong now. Every touch reminded me of the price we had paid. We still could not acknowledge our relationship publicly. Too scandalous, the widowed queen and her royal guard chief. We needed to wait at least a year, Rowan said, before we could begin courting openly. Then another year before marriage. Propriety demanded patience. Meanwhile, we stole moments in darkness like thieves, which felt appropriate since we had stolen everything else. The mate bond should have made us complete, should have filled the hollow spaces with perfect understanding and unconditional love. Instead, it highlighted every crack in our foundation. When Rowan held me, I felt Cassian's chains. When he whispered that he loved me, I heard the lie we lived. When he talked about our future together, I saw only blood-soaked crowns and prison bars. "You are distracted lately," Rowan observed one night after we had finished making love, if you could call it that, when one person was performing and the other was enduring. "What troubles you?" "Everything," I wanted to say. "My conscience, my soul. The innocent man rotting in dungeons beneath us while we tangled in silk sheets above." But saying it would start a fight we had been avoiding for months. "I am simply tired," I lied. "Governance is exhausting." "You are magnificent at it," he said, kissing my shoulder. "Aldrich never accomplished half of what you have in 6 months. The people love you." The people did not know me. They loved an illusion, a performance, a queen who did not exist. I could not bear it anymore. 3 months into my reign, I made a decision that Rowan knew nothing about. I would visit Cassian, see what my choices had cost, face the man whose life I had destroyed. I went at midnight, disguised in a servant's cloak, my hair hidden beneath a hood. The guards at the dungeon entrance recognized me despite the disguise. One does not forget a queen's face, but I pressed a finger to my lips, and they nodded understanding. "Let her grieve privately," their expressions said. "Let the widow mourn in her own strange way." The dungeons were worse than I remembered from my brief visit after the sentencing. The deeper I descended, the more the air thickened with dampness and despair. Water dripped from stone ceilings. The smell of human waste and mold competed with the metallic tang of iron chains. Torches flickered, creating dancing shadows that looked like ghosts. Cassian's cell was in the lowest level, reserved for the most dangerous criminals. Regicides, traitors, murderers who threatened the crown. I stood outside the bars for a full minute before I could speak, just watching him. He had lost weight. his frame gaunt, his face hollow. His beard had grown wild and unkempt. His clothes were the rough gray tunics they gave to prisoners, stained and threadbare. But his eyes, those kind eyes that had looked at an injured wolf and seen a creature worth saving, were still clear, still somehow gentle despite everything. "Your Majesty," he said softly when he noticed me, struggling to stand with chains hampering his movement. "You honor me with this visit. Do not," I choked out, "do not be kind to me. Do not honor me. I deserve your hatred." He studied me for a long moment, then sat back down on his stone bench. What would my hatred accomplish? Would it free me? Would it undo what has been done? Would it ease your suffering? My suffering? I nearly laughed at the absurdity. "I am not the one in chains, Cassian. I am not the one condemned for a crime I did not commit." "No," he agreed quietly. "But you are imprisoned nonetheless. I can see it in your eyes, Your Majesty. The bars of your cage are invisible, but no less real than mine." I sank to my knees on the filthy floor outside his cell, no longer caring about dignity or propriety. "I am so sorry. I let them blame you. I stood there and watched them convict you, and I said nothing. I am a monster." "You are a woman who made a terrible choice in terrible circumstances," he replied. "That does not make you a monster, just human. How can you forgive me?" The question came out broken. "How can you sit there and offer me absolution when I destroyed your life?" "Because holding on to anger would destroy me faster than these chains ever could," Cassian said. "I had a choice when they convicted me. I could rage against the injustice, fight and resist and make myself bitter, or I could accept what I cannot change and find peace where I could. I chose peace. You should not have to choose that," I said desperately. "You should be free, in your cabin, cutting wood, living your simple life. Instead, you are here because I was too much of a coward to accept my own fate. Perhaps," he acknowledged, "but perhaps this is where I need to be. I have had much time to think in this cell, Your Majesty, to reflect on the years I spent alone, drowning in grief over losing my wife and child. I was not living in that cabin. I was hiding, waiting to die without having the courage to do it myself. At least here, I have a purpose. I carry this burden so that you can rule, so that Monaco can have a good queen instead of a tyrant. If my suffering serves that end, then it is not meaningless." His words were like knives in my chest, each one cutting deeper. "Your suffering should not serve my ambitions. That is not justice." "No," he agreed. "It is not. But justice is a luxury for people with power, Your Majesty. I am a common woodsman accused of regicide. Justice was never going to be mine regardless of truth, at least this way. Something good comes from my imprisonment." I could not speak, could only kneel there on cold stone while tears streamed down my face. Cassian watched me with those impossibly gentle eyes. "Does he know you are here?" he asked eventually. "Your mate? The Royal Guard chief?" I looked up sharply. "How did you—" "I am not blind, Your Majesty. I saw the way he looked at you during my trial, the way you carefully did not look at each other. The mate bond is obvious to those who know how to see it." He smiled sadly. "Does he suffer as you do, or has he made his peace with what you did?" "He believes we made the right choice," I admitted, "that freeing me from Aldrich was worth any price." "And you? What do you believe?" I had no answer. Or rather, I had too many answers warring inside me. I believed Aldrich deserved his death. I believed I deserved my freedom. I believed Cassian deserved his innocence. I believed all of it, and none of it simultaneously. A constant contradiction that was tearing me apart. "I believe," I finally said, "that I am not strong enough to carry this crown." "Then put it down," Cassian said simply. The words hung in the air between us, revolutionary and impossible. "I cannot just— The kingdom needs a ruler who can sleep at night," Cassian interrupted gently, "who can make decisions without wondering if every choice is another sin added to an already damning pile. You are destroying yourself, Your Majesty. I can see it happening. And if you destroy yourself, then my sacrifice truly is meaningless." I left the dungeon with no answers, only more questions, but Cassian's words followed me. "Then put it down." Could I? Could I simply abdicate, walk away, leave Monaco to choose another ruler? The idea was both terrifying and seductive. Freedom from the weight, the responsibility, the constant reminder of what I had done. But also failure, cowardice, running away from consequences yet again. I confronted Rowan that night in my chambers. He had come expecting another secret rendezvous, but found me instead standing by the window, still wearing the cloak from my prison visit. "Where have you been?" he asked, concerned. "Your guard said—" "I visited Cassian," I said flatly. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "You did what?" "I had to see him, had to know what we did to him." "Rose, that was incredibly foolish. If anyone connects you to—" "They will connect nothing," I interrupted. "I was disguised. It is not the visit I need to discuss. It is what comes next." Rowan went very still, the way predators do before they strike. "What comes next?" "We need to free him." "Absolutely not." "Rowan." "No." His voice was hard as iron. "We have discussed this. Freeing him would raise questions we cannot answer, would unravel everything. The investigation would start again, and this time they would look closer. At you, at me, at the convenient timing of everything. No. So we just leave him there? Let him rot for a crime he did not commit while we live in luxury?" "Yes," Rowan said, and at least he had the decency not to dress it in prettier words. "That is exactly what we do. It is unfortunate. It is unfair. But it is necessary." "Necessary for what? Our happiness? Our convenience? Our survival?" Rowan's composure cracked. "Rose, listen to yourself. You are talking about confessing to regicide. Do you understand what that means? Execution. For both of us. Everything we sacrificed. Everything we gained. Gone. And is what we gained worth what we sacrificed?" I asked quietly. "Can you honestly look at me and say that living this lie is better than accepting the consequences of our actions?" "Yes," he said without hesitation. "Because I love you. Because I would rather live a lie with you than die for the truth. Because pragmatism beats idealism every time." "And there it is," I said, understanding finally crystallizing. "The difference between us. You can justify anything if the end serves your purpose. But I am drowning, Rowan. Every day I sink deeper into this guilt, and I do not know how much longer I can breathe." "Then do not breathe so deeply," he said, trying for gentle and failing. "Let it go. Accept that we made hard choices and move forward. The past is done. We cannot change it. We can free Cassian. That would be something." "It would be suicide." Rowan crossed to me, took my shoulders. "I am begging you. Let this go. Give it time. In a few years, when our rule is secure and the memory has faded, we can arrange something. Early release. Pardon. But not now. Not when everything is still so fresh." I looked at this man, my fated mate, the one the moon goddess had chosen for me, and I saw finally who he really was. Not evil. Not a monster. Just someone whose love was ultimately self-serving, who valued security over honor, convenience over justice. The mate bond had given me a soulmate, but not a moral compass. "If I do this," I said slowly, "if I confess and free Cassian, I lose everything, including you." "Yes," he said, his grip tightening. "You do, and I cannot follow you into that sacrifice, Rose. I will not throw away my life for your guilt." "I know," I said, pulling away from him. "I would not ask you to." "Then what are you saying?" "I am saying that I need to think. To really think about what kind of queen I want to be. What kind of person. And I need to do that alone." Rowan left, and I was grateful for the solitude. But I could not think clearly surrounded by the trappings of power, the constant reminders of what I had gained. So I went to the one place in the palace that had always felt sacred, the chapel. It was a small stone room, tucked in the oldest part of the castle, lit only by candles and moonlight through stained glass windows. I had never been particularly devout. The moon goddess felt distant, more myth than reality. But tonight I needed something beyond myself, some guidance from a power that understood the weight of impossible choices. I knelt before the altar and prayed, though I did not know what I was asking for. Forgiveness? Permission? Courage? All of it? None of it? "Moon goddess," I whispered into the silence, "if you can hear me, if you care at all about the messes your wolves make, I need wisdom. I need to know what to do." At first, nothing. Just silence and candlelight and the smell of old incense. Then gradually something shifted. The air grew heavier, charged with presence. The candles flickered though there was no wind, and I felt, rather than heard, an answer. "Show me what you really want," a voice seemed to say. "Not what you should want, or what others expect, but what your soul truly craves." I closed my eyes and let myself feel, really feel, without censoring or justifying. What did I want? I wanted to sleep without nightmares, wanted to look at myself in a mirror without flinching, wanted Cassian to be free, even if it cost me everything, wanted to rule without the weight of lies crushing me, wanted honor more than power, truth more than comfort, justice more than love. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I wanted redemption, and redemption required sacrifice. The vision came then, clear as daylight. I saw 2 paths branching before me. Path 1, keep silent, rule in guilt, live with Rowan, but with a soul increasingly fractured. Achieve good things, help many people, but always wonder if the foundation was too rotten to support anything truly noble. Die eventually as a celebrated queen, leaving behind a legacy built on murder and lies. Path 2, confess everything, abdicate the throne, free Cassian, face justice for my crimes, lose Rowan, lose power, lose everything I had fought for, but regain the one thing I had sacrificed without meaning to, my honor, my ability to look at myself and not see a monster, the freedom that comes not from escaping consequences, but from finally accepting them. Queens are measured not by what they conquer, the voice seemed to say, but by what they sacrifice for truth. I opened my eyes. The candles burned steady now. The presence had faded, but the clarity remained. I knew what I had to do. 2 days later, I called an emergency session of the Royal Council and the noble houses. Every person of importance in Monaco gathered in the throne room, speculation running wild. The young queen summoning them urgently. Was it war? A marriage announcement? Some crisis that required immediate action? I sat on the throne, that heavy seat of power that Aldrich had occupied, that had passed to me through death and lies, and looked out at the assembled faces. Lords and ladies, merchants and military officers, clergy and common representatives, the people who would judge what came next. Rowan stood with the guards at the back of the room. Our eyes met once. His face was pale, understanding already dawning. I mouthed, "I am sorry," and turned away. I stood, removing the crown from my head with both hands, held it up so everyone could see the heavy golden thing that had pressed into my skull for 6 months. "I have gathered you here to confess a crime," I began, and the room went silent as a tomb. 6 months ago, King Aldrich died on the northern cliffs in what was ruled an accidental fall. That ruling was incomplete. The truth is more complicated and far more damning. Whispers started immediately. I spoke over them, my voice carrying to every corner. The king was abusive. For 3 years of marriage, he humiliated me publicly, denied me basic dignity, and made my life a prolonged torture. I do not say this to excuse what I did, only to explain it. I was drowning, and I saw only one way to breathe. The whispers grew louder. Someone shouted for order. I continued. I planned his death, not alone. I had help, but I was the architect. I studied the cliffs where he liked to ride drunk. I tested the route myself, learning where the dangerous spots were. On the night he died, I accompanied him knowing what would happen. When he slipped on the moss, I had the ability to save him. Shifter reflexes, enhanced speed. I could have caught his hand. I chose not to. The throne room erupted in chaos. People shouting, crying out, guards moving forward uncertainly. Through it all, I kept speaking, forcing them to hear. Furthermore, there is a man in our dungeons right now, serving a life sentence for my crime. Cassian Thorne is innocent. He saved my life when I injured myself testing the route. He kept my secret because I asked him to, not because he was involved in any conspiracy. His imprisonment is my doing. His suffering is my sin. Your Majesty, the Chancellor tried to interrupt, his face purple with shock and rage. You cannot. This is... I abdicate the throne, I said clearly, placing the crown on the seat I had just vacated. Effective immediately. I am no longer your queen. I am Rose Silverfang, a woman guilty of regicide through action or inaction, and guilty of condemning an innocent man to pay for my crimes. I submit myself to your justice. Do with me what you will. I descended the steps from the throne platform. Guards rushed forward, not sure if they should stop me or arrest me. I held out my wrists. I will come peacefully. Please release Cassian Thorne from his cell. He is innocent. They arrested me then, led me away while the council dissolved into shouting arguments. I caught glimpses of faces as I was escorted out, some shocked, some sympathetic, some furious, and Rowan, standing frozen at the back of the room, looking like I had just stabbed him through the heart. Perhaps I had, but better a clean wound than a festering lie. The trial that followed consumed Monaco for weeks. Every detail was examined, every witness questioned, every moment dissected. The scandal was enormous. A queen confessing to murdering her king, abdicating her throne, freeing a falsely accused man. Nothing like it had ever happened in Monaco's history. I answered every question honestly, described every detail of the plan, every moment of the execution, every choice that led to Aldrich's death. I left out only Rowan's involvement, claiming I had acted alone with Cassian's unwitting assistance. When pressed, I held firm. I alone bore responsibility. Rowan testified that he had suspected nothing, that the king's death had appeared accidental to him. His performance was flawless, his lies more convincing than my truths had ever been. I did not resent it. I had given him permission to survive this, and he was using it. But the moment that changed everything came when they brought Cassian from his cell to testify. He looked better than when I had visited him. They had cleaned him up for the trial, given him decent clothes, allowed him to bathe and trim his beard. But 6 months of imprisonment had still marked him. He walked stiffly, chains removed, but the memory of them present in every movement. The prosecutor expected him to condemn me, wanted him to describe his suffering, to demand justice, to play the role of wronged innocent seeking revenge. Instead, Cassian looked at the judges and said, "Queen Rose, the former queen, suffered unspeakable abuse for 3 years. I saw evidence of it when I cared for her injuries. Not just physical wounds, but the deeper damage of a spirit being systematically destroyed. She was a woman drowning in despair, seeing no escape except through desperate action." He paused, looked at me directly. "What she did was wrong. I will not pretend otherwise. Taking a life, even a cruel life, is a line that should not be crossed lightly. But it was born of survival, not malice, of desperation, not evil. And the fact that she has confessed when she could have remained silent, that she has freed me when it would have been easier to let me rot, that takes more courage than I possess." His words moved the courtroom. The prosecutor sputtered objections, but public sentiment was already shifting. Here was the man who had suffered most from Rose's actions, and he was advocating for mercy. The deliberations took 3 days. The kingdom was divided. Some demanded execution for regicide. Others argued that Aldrich's abuse and Rose's confession warranted leniency. In the end, the judges returned with a verdict that satisfied no one and everyone simultaneously. Guilty of conspiracy to commit regicide and obstruction of justice. But the sentence, exile for 5 years, not execution. Stripped of all titles, forbidden from governing, but permitted to live. The court acknowledges the extraordinary circumstances, the head judge read, the genuine contrition, and the courage required to confess when detection was unlikely. We balance justice with mercy, punishment with understanding. Rose Silverfang will leave Monaco for 5 years. Should she return, it will be as a private citizen, never again to hold royal office. Rowan came to see me the night before my exile began. We met in a private chamber under guard supervision. No more secret passages, no more stolen moments. "I don't know whether to hate you or admire you," he said quietly. "Both, probably," I replied. "I did betray you, even as I tried to protect you. You chose principle over love, over us, over everything we built together. I chose truth," I corrected gently. And truth meant accepting that what we built was beautiful but poisoned. Sometimes you have to tear down what you love to stop it from killing you. The mate bond pulled between us, aching with separation. But it was the ache of something ending, not beginning. "I won't wait for you," Rowan said, and I heard the hurt beneath the words. 5 years is too long, and even if you return, we've broken something that can't be repaired. "I know," I said. "Find someone else, someone you can love without guilt. Someone who shares your willingness to prioritize survival over everything else. That's not weakness, Rowan. It's just who you are. We're simply different people. I'll never forget you," he said, touching my face one last time. The mate bond sang and mourned simultaneously. "My mate, my queen, my greatest failure. And you were mine," I replied. "But some bonds survive better as memories than realities." He left without kissing me goodbye. I was grateful. Some endings need distance to be clean. The next morning, they put me on a ship bound for the Northern Territories, a remote region where I could live quietly without recognition. I stood on deck as Monaco disappeared behind me, watching the palace shrink from imposing fortress to white dot on distant cliffs. I had lost everything: crown, power, love, home, mate bond, future. But as the sun rose over the ocean, painting the sky in impossible colors, I felt something I had not felt in years. Peace, Real peace, not the false calm of buried guilt, but the true serenity of a soul finally unburdened. I was free, not the freedom I had imagined when planning Aldrich's death. That had been an illusion, a larger cage with prettier bars. This was authentic freedom, the kind that comes from owning your choices, accepting their consequences, and knowing you finally chose honor over convenience. The price had been everything, but everything had been worth it to reclaim my soul. 5 years passed like water over stones, gradually reshaping everything it touched. I lived in a fishing village on the northern coast, working as a healer and midwife. No one knew I had been queen. I was simply Rose, the woman who delivered babies and set broken bones and charged only what people could afford. I learned what it meant to be ordinary, to work with my hands, to earn bread through labor, to sleep dreamlessly because my conscience was clean. The mate bond with Rowan faded to background noise, always present but no longer controlling. My wolf found peace in simplicity, in helping rather than ruling, in being rather than performing. News from Monaco reached me occasionally through travelers and merchants. Aldrich's younger brother had taken the throne, proving competent and fair. The reforms I had started continued and expanded. Cassian had returned to his woodsman's cabin and was reportedly helping rebuild homes in villages damaged by recent storms. Rowan had married a noblewoman from a neighboring kingdom, a political match that strengthened his position. I felt no jealousy when I heard this, only quiet hope that he had found contentment, that the mate bond had released him as it had released me. In my 4th year of exile, I received a letter, just one, short and to the point. Rose, thank you for the truth. I am free. I am rebuilding. I hope you are finding peace. Your friend Cassian. I cried when I read it, but they were clean tears, relief and gratitude without the poison of guilt. When my 5 years ended, I returned to Monaco, not because I had to, but because I chose to. It was home, despite everything. The ship docked at the same harbor where I had departed, and I half expected indifference or hostility. Instead, a crowd waited. They were not angry. They were curious, sympathetic, welcoming. The fallen queen who had chosen truth over power, who had sacrificed everything for honor. I had become something unexpected. A legend. A symbol. Cassian was there at the edge of the crowd. He came forward as I descended the gangplank and embraced me like an old friend. "Welcome home," he said simply. "Is it home?" I asked. "It can be, if you want it to be." The new king had granted me a small house in the city, a modest pension, and restoration of my family name, though not my titles. I would never rule again, but I could live here as a citizen. I accepted gratefully. Over the months that followed, I built a new life. I opened a clinic for those who could not afford royal physicians. I taught healing arts to anyone interested. I lived quietly and purposefully, making small amends that would never balance the scales, but helped me sleep at night. Cassian became a true friend. We met regularly for meals and conversation, two people who had survived the same storm and understood each other's scars without needing explanation. Never lovers. The connection was deeper than romance, simpler than passion, just mutual understanding and genuine affection. I saw Rowan once from a distance at a royal procession. His wife was lovely and kind-faced. He looked content, settled in a way he never had with me. Our eyes met briefly across the crowd. He nodded once, acknowledgement and closure. I nodded back. The mate bond was still there, would always be there, but it no longer controlled either of us. We had found other ways to be whole. Years passed. Life became not what I had planned, but what I had earned. Not glamorous, but honest. Not powerful, but purposeful. One afternoon, many years after my return, Cassian and I sat on a cliff overlooking the ocean. Not the northern cliffs where everything had happened, but a different set of rocks, safer, gentler, facing south toward warmer waters. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. Confessing, losing everything, the exile. I thought about it honestly, weighing truth against comfortable lies. I regret the choices that led to needing confession. I regret Aldrich's death, and your imprisonment, and the pain I caused. But the confession itself? No. That was the first honest thing I did in months. It cost me everything, but it gave me back something more important. "What?" "My soul," I said simply. "I lost a crown of gold, but gained a crown of thorns that I wear with honor. And thorns, my friend, are more honest than gold." He smiled at that, the man I had used, and who had forgiven me anyway. "You were always a queen, Rose. You just needed to discover what kind." He was right. I had been Queen Regent of Monaco, wearing Aldrich's crown and pretending power made me royal. But true queenship, the kind that matters, comes not from what you conquer, but from what you sacrifice for truth. I learned that freedom does not come from crowns or mate bonds or perfect circumstances. It comes from being able to sleep at night, knowing you chose honor over convenience, truth over power, and justice over selfish happiness. I paid dearly for my freedom, lost everything I thought I wanted, but in losing it, I gained everything I actually needed. The crown of thorns, invisible, painful, earned through sacrifice, fits better than gold ever did. No one can take it from me. No one can tarnish it with lies. I am Rose Silverfang. I was queen. I was murderer. I was coward and confessor and exile and healer. Now I am simply myself, flawed and forgiven and finally free. And that crown, the one made of honesty and hard choices and accepted consequences, is the only one worth wearing. It fits perfectly.